Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. Anyway, hello, guys. I'm here with my good friend, Chris Cunningham, and we are going to do a Ask Us Anything. Yes, because we are that vain. You can ask us anything about Cooper. We're the experts. So that's how that goes. How are you this evening, Chris?
I am, in the words of the Miami Dolphins legend, Jim Mandich, I've never been better, my friend. I am happy and healthy. The family is happy and healthy. Cut back on some drinking, lost some weight, been exercising. So feel good. Everything's good. How about you?
I am very well, my friend. You look wonderful. Yeah, you look good, man. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm not appreciate that. You're complimenting me, but
no, I appreciate
you. It's just I'm saying. Yes, you should appreciate my compliments. There we go. And yes, we already have a guest saying that he's going to be smoking 7 or 8 cigarettes this entire time. So that's good.
Fair enough.
Sure
I will not be doing that because I do not want to vomit on camera. So.
Oh yeah, that would not be good. So all right, so we're going to do this. Ask Us Anything, and we're going to jump right in. Let's see. Okay, Drew Daniel asks, "What are you guys' thoughts on the bombs, on the real versus fake status after Darren's podcast with Mike Vining? Does the validity of the bomb tell us anything about his background, occupation, or personality?" Chris?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always sort of believed that the bomb was fake. And I think Darren's episode with Mike Vining kind of confirmed that belief for me. I just think they're just the fact that I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was that it was the battery, according to Mike, was much larger than it needed to be in order to detonate it. And I think to me indicates more of a show, more of a theatrics where you have this great big battery and it's a little more impressive visually than maybe a little, a little battery would be. And he says that's all you need is just a small electrical charge. So there's a few things there that he said that indicated to me that the bomb was, more than likely fake. But, maybe it was real. Who's to say? We'll probably never know. But just based on, and just based on Drew's question in regards to Mike Vining, I think Mike, to me, put together a pretty compelling case that the bomb was in fact fake.
Yeah, I would agree that he was pretty compelling. And speaking of Mike Vining, I was actually watching a video on YouTube the other day of Barbara Walters interviewing Norman Schwarzkopf during the first Gulf War. And in the video, he's got these two guys, these two Delta Force type guys as his bodyguards in this video. And one of them is Mike Vining.
Yeah, he's a video. Yeah, he's a legit badass. I mean, he's and he's an expert. I'm very, very big on expert opinions, and I bow to the experts. So who am I to argue with a guy who worked with explosives and demolition and explosive disposal in 1971? I mean, who am I to argue with a guy like that? Unless I have an agenda that I'm trying to push.
And really, I would prefer Cooper's bomb to be fake because not that I have any affinity for the guy himself, but he takes it to another level of psychopathy if it was actually real.
Right.
That you graduate to, mass murderer status when you have a real bomb. That's not something I don't feel comfortable with.
Cooper being and it seems like I think I said on Darren's podcast, I think it seems unnecessary. It seems like, pardon the expression, overkill.
Sure.
All he needs is a 38 special tucked in his pocket of his raincoat. He doesn't need a bomb to threaten someone who's attempting to foil his plans. So
or to kill himself if need be. Right. So he just needed the bomb for effect. He needed the flares and the battery for effect to potentially frighten a young woman and convince the cockpit crew. But by comparison, it was a very good fake. If it was a fake, it was at least looked It would have. It looked, the wiring at least looked appropriate.
It looked believable. Yeah,
looked believable. You know, Tina noticed that even the wires, the end of the wires were stripped.
Right.
You know, which
and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, her father was an electrician.
Right.
So
she understood wires.
Presumably, she'd have at least a rudimentary knowledge of wires and batteries and wiring and you know how circuits work and those types of things.
Okay. Next, Chris Brower, the Bloodhound, asks, this is going to be directed to you, certainly. What probability do you assign that Cooper jumped as far south as the Columbia River?
Say that one more time.
What probability do you assign
to
him jumping as far south as the Columbia River?
Well, I mean, I'm an outlier here. I would probably, I would give it a very high probability. If I had to display it in a heat map, I would say that the brightest colors would be over what is now metropolitan Vancouver, and then it would get the colors would get a little more dark as you moved farther north along the flight path, probably terminating somewhere around the Merwin Dam. But I think it's very likely that he jumped much closer to Vancouver. So if I had to put a number on it, geez, I don't know, 70% maybe, that he jumped somewhere closer to Vancouver than some of the other places. But I don't completely discount the idea that he could have jumped near Orchards or Rush Prairie or even Battleground. But I think Battleground is probably the northernmost likely area. I think anything between Battleground and the Columbia River is probably fair game.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I guess it's interesting. I would say that our maps, our heat maps would be inverse on that. I guess it's just our thoughts on it. My thoughts have always been that I don't know why he would jump out. Clearly he understood geography. And so I don't know why he would jump out near a mile wide river.
Yeah.
It seems
the only thing
also near a highly populated area that just doesn't seem smart.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say to that is that Cooper never delineated any type of flight path. He just said, basically, take me to Reno. In the end, obviously, originally it was Mexico City, but in the end it was take me to Reno, and he never delineated a flight path. So in Cooper's mind, he has no idea what route that plane's going to take. Obviously there's some school of thought that he chose that altitude to force that plane down Victor 23, which was a low altitude airway. But assuming that he did not, he had no idea really where he was. Yeah. Portland, Vancouver could have easily been Eugene or, Longview, Kelso. I don't think he had any certainty as to where he was jumping. Just in terms of the fact that he didn't know where the plane was going to go when it left Seattle.
Yeah, I would say that as far as where he knew he was, I've always given him my best case scenario is that he knew he was over Clark County. I mean, I would know that. I use my own area as an example. If Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi is about a 30-minute flight. It's, almost the exact same distance. And just like Seattle to Portland is I-5, we have I-55. Memphis to just straight shot up south, south and north on to Memphis to Jackson. And I grew up here, but I would know that I think I could have a pretty good idea just looking out trying to look around and look for lights, knowing that there are city lights here. There's no city lights there. I would probably know what county I was in, the county just north of Jackson. I think I could figure that out. And maybe he did too. So, but that's the most I'm going to give him.
Yeah. And I know we've downplayed and rightly so the severity of the weather, but it was still soupy. It was still, there were still three layers of cloud cover.
Three layers of cloud cover beneath him.
Yeah, it was still rainy. So it does not mean he could not see, some fuzzed out lights down below.
Right.
But I think any type of precision that he was trying to make with his jump, I think is pretty dodgy. And then, I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but in sort of triangulating the pilot statements with the communications, with the timing and everything, I think I've got a pretty good gauge on where he jumped, and I'm going to give a presentation on that at CooperCon. But and hopefully that'll be enlightening to some people. But in answer to the original question, I think it's probably 67%, let's say, 2/3 chance that he jumped closer to Vancouver than points north.
Sure. All right. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Tim Wallace asks, did Cooper ever take his coat off? No, there's no indication of that he ever did.
In fact,
that.
He jumped with it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I don't think he would have ever needed to take his coat off. Presumably you're talking about his raincoat. No, there'd be no reason to do that. I can't imagine that. Let's see. Okay. Jim Aurelian, in the Tusaw book, page 22, Cooper was no longer wearing his sunglasses when Alice and Flo spoke to him. Is that true? So this is interesting. So yes, in Tusaw, he says that when Flo and Alice go talk to him to basically say, hey, let us off the plane, that Cooper had removed, there it is, that Cooper no longer had his sunglasses on. Well, either Tusaw had access to the 302s, or he got this directly from one of the stewardesses. And the reason I bring this up is because in Flo's 302, I'll put it on the screen here. In Flo's 302, she's describing this incident here. She's basically saying that they were discussing yada yada with Cooper, and she said the man asked, she said that she asked the man if the stewardesses could leave, and the man said, "Sure, go ahead," in a calm, uninterested manner. The very next sentence, though, is Schaffner said that by this time the man had begun putting on one of the back parachutes, and at some time during their conversation had put on a pair of sunglasses. Now, this is interesting. I don't know what to make of that precisely, because it could be, remember, the way that these notes were written, they're just written as the person is saying stuff in the interview. And it could be that that this statement here that Schaffner says at one point during their conversation that he put on a pair of sunglasses, she could be referring to the very start, the very initial conversation that she had, because that's basically when Cooper put the sunglasses on, was when he was discussing the ransom with Flo when she came to sit next to him, that he put the sunglasses on at some point around that time. However, it could be that there is some school of thought that Cooper did not put his sunglasses on until Tina came and sat next to him. So this is going to be this is going to be Flo's first time seeing Cooper after she went to the cockpit, is when she comes back at this point, and he's wearing sunglasses all of a sudden. Or it could be that, it's interesting. At some point during their conversation, he had put on a pair of sunglasses. So that's either he had the sunglasses off when Alice and Flo are saying, hey, let us leave, or this is a reference to an earlier time when Cooper was getting the ransom with Flo earlier in the flight. It's really hard to say.
Pretty specific to me when it says at some point during their conversation.
Yeah, but which conversation is it? Yeah, it seems like it's this conversation that they're having.
Well, based on the flow of the narrative here, it'd be the conversation that they're having in the paragraph prior.
Yeah, and it seems to me that I could see Cooper let's just look at what Cooper does. Once the passengers leave, Cooper becomes a lot more relaxed. There's no mention at all of the bomb, or of Cooper having his hand in the bomb after the passengers leave. The only time the bomb is ever mentioned again is when Tina asks him, please take it with you. That's it. There's no mention of the bomb at any point, really, of him threatening with it or whatever. So really, his concern was the passengers, maybe intimidating the passengers or keeping them unaware of who he was or whatever. So it could be that he took his sunglasses off at some point once the passengers left, which the passengers are gone at this point, and then put him back on. It's hard to say. And then, interestingly, Gregory, in Gregory's 30, not in his 302, but there is one statement where Gregory says that Cooper had his sunglasses off at one point when Gregory looked at him. So I don't know if that's when Gregory boarded the plane for the very first time and Cooper had not put his sunglasses on, or if this was at a later point. Cooper had just maybe happened to have his sunglasses off at this particular point. So I do think there is a possibility that Cooper removed his sunglasses a few times and put them back on. I think there's enough in there to say that I can't say with all certainty that he kept them on the entire time once he put them on originally.
Yeah. I've always kind of believed that the reason that he wore the sunglasses was to prepare his eyes for a night jump.
It's one of the many reasons, for sure. One of the many reasons.
Obviously disguise and concealing his appearance to a certain degree, but I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that he wore the sunglasses inside the plane to prepare his eyes for a night jump. I do know that it's common for when there is a night jump to keep the lights in the plane very low.
Sure.
So that, people can adjust their eyes in the darkness when they're leaping out of an aircraft.
Well, and it reminds me almost of I don't know if it's true or not, but there is a trope, or not a trope, but the thing about pirates wearing an eye patch, supposedly that they would do that because if they had to run below decks, they could just flip it over and they would have their night vision in the eye that was covered on deck. So when they're on deck, they might have, that seems a lot of trouble to do that. But I have heard that by having by wearing an eye patch, it keeps one of their eyes in night vision and one of their eyes in day vision.
So you're telling me that they did not wear eye patches because they got their eye plucked out with a dagger by Jack Sparrow?
Correct. That it was really just
You're ruining my childhood, Ryan.
I know. It's like, hey, and Viking helmets had no horns, sir. That is a myth as well. So, okay. Let's see. Here's one.
Ryan Burns ruins everything.
I do. Do you guys think the stuff Ulyss is doing on the tie will ever lead to anything, or is it a total dead end?
I'll let you start with that one.
Okay, thank you. I would say no.
I don't have the graphic up, by the way.
Oh, I do. Thank you for telling me that. I need to remove that. I would say no. I don't think that this is not an indictment on Eric or anything. I just think that the tie is too contaminated at this point to give us anything good. Maybe the tie spindle is, I understand Eric's argument that the tie spindle wasn't, looked at or things like that. But I think it's too contaminated at this point. The tie has been passed around way too much, and there's too much DNA on it from God knows who, that I just don't think that, I don't think the tie is going to give us anything. I think the only two areas where we could get good DNA would be possibly from the shroud lines through touch DNA, or obviously finding that stupid hair slide. What do you think?
That's on you, buddy.
The hair slide? Well, true.
Yeah, I'm looking at it a little differently. I certainly hope that they're successful, and I'm rooting for them because if they solve the case, fantastic. It's over, and we can move on to something else. So I hope it's successful, but I am not optimistic. I obviously don't. He struck out with the lawsuit with the FBI, so that the DNA that he was hoping to get off the tie spindle is sort of a moot point at this point. I do know that he and Tom were hoping to do some work with the ancient DNA, with the metagenomic stuff. I have not heard any updates on that, so I don't know what the status of that is yet. But as I've explained in other platforms, the best that you could hope for is a DNA profile in which you can do one-to-one elimination, meaning you have a profile, and if my grandfather, we want to eliminate my grandfather, you can put his DNA up against the Cooper DNA and eliminate him or confirm him. That's different than having a DNA profile that you can, a SNP profile, SNP, in which you can put into you can do genetic genealogy and actually find Cooper and find a name. That is a whole different ball of wax. So I'm hoping that something can be done in terms of DNA that allows us to get a full SNP profile from DB Cooper that we can then enter into like a GEDmatch or something like that and have a professional forensic genetic genealogist do some magic and see if we can find a distant relative of DB Cooper and reverse engineer a family tree and actually find Cooper's name rather than just saying, nope, it's not Vince Peterson, or no, it's not Milton Vordal, or no, it's not William J. Smith, or, no, it's not McCoy. We want to find a name rather than just eliminate the suspects. But I'm hoping that they're successful. I'm rooting for them.
Sure. Okay. Olivia in England says, what advice would you give someone who's just getting into the case and is interested in researching it more? I would say that the most important thing, you have to start out with the witness statements on NORJAC. On my website, norjac.org, I would say that is, you have to start out reading the actual words that the people who were there. Again, this guy existed for 5 hours. Our only evidence of this guy is from the witnesses. So I think that you really have to start there and read their statements, read what they say about it. And then from there, I would say to read, I think Bruce's book is a good resource. I would say just dig into the files, perhaps. Chris, what do you say?
Yeah, I guess my advice would be a little more philosophical. I would just try to stay humble and try to stay open-minded. A lot of people get into the case and they immediately zero in on a suspect, or they immediately zero in on a theory and they lock into it. And, I would avoid that. I'd keep an open mind and try to avoid getting latched onto a theory or a suspect too soon, and prepare to be proven wrong and prepare to, have egg on your face. I've been guilty of this where, I think I'm hot shit and I'm smart and I know all the answers. And, I end up, getting my head dunked in a toilet. So,
it's a humbling experience being a Cooper researcher, honestly.
It really is. It really is, especially if you're intellectually honest and you're like, oh man, I totally blew that. I was wrong. I totally blew it. And, so yeah, and it's certainly happened to me, and I'm sure it will happen again. And, it reminds me of that quote from Socrates where he says, I'm the wisest man in the world because I know one thing, and that's that I know nothing. So I know nothing.
Well, with Cooper, I would say that I would quote George Harrison and say, the more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Especially when I listen to Tom Kay's presentation, which just,
Yeah. And on this thing about what you just mentioned about how it's humbling and stuff, that there are some people out there in the vortex who will complain about people changing suspects, or will complain about, oh, you've changed your mind on this. Well, I don't know how that's a complaint. I think that's a virtue, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Being wrong and admit. That seems very arrogant to say that, or almost it's ignorant, really, to have a opinion and not stick with it, and to not change it when there's contradictory evidence. I don't understand that. I mean, if I'm to the point now where I do think Cooper basically was a giant piece of shit. And that has come through just really thinking about it and really examining how, as I said in one of my podcasts, try to really imagine yourself doing this. Like literally imagine. It's unfathomable to me that I would just go hijack a plane tomorrow. That is ridiculous. And it should be ridiculous if you have a suspect who is not out of their mind or very criminally minded. Like I just don't. No one. I came across a Himmelsbach quote recently that was good. Actually, Ralph did have some good quotes where he said, "No law-abiding citizen wakes up at that age and decides to do something like this. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen." And so Cooper is not, we like to think Cooper's an outlier because, he got away. But I often say that he got away because he was first. I would say that's more luck than anything, or just being the first. It's not being great. I mean, he was better than most. That kind of segues into Drew's question here, where Drew says, what factors do you guys feel set DB Cooper apart from the copycats and swung his success rate? Side question for Ryan: did any of the copycats select a terminating flight? I'll start with the end there. Side question: did any of the copycats select a terminating flight? Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that ever crossed their mind, but it does seem that may have crossed Cooper's mind to know that what he wanted to happen was going to happen with the passengers off the plane, and having them not be antsy, essentially. I think that really benefits him because he's not inconveniencing the passengers to an insane degree, really, because they are arriving at their destination and they can get off at their destination, whereas other hijackers are hijacking at random points in the flights and things like this. And really, and Cooper flew he flew it to its destination. For example, McCoy's flight, I believe, was going to LA, and he diverted it to San Francisco. So you have all these passengers who are getting off in San Francisco, and they're wondering why the hell they're in San Francisco and all this sort of things like this. So Cooper, by selecting a terminating flight, was rather, if he did that on purpose, that does seem to be somewhat thought out. But what factors do you feel set Cooper apart? I would just say that. I would say that by virtue of being first, you get extreme bonus points. It's exponential how much he benefited from being the first, because the other guys, they were able to figure out to bug their parachutes or how to, the pressure bump. Again, to know Cooper had a 40-hour head start. He could have crawled out of the DZ. Right now, what's interesting though is what we say now that I say that though, the only two guys were caught within their DZ, and that would be LaPointe, who jumped in broad daylight and literally had a jet circling him as he came down in his canopy. Then you had, who was it? Rob Hetty, who was, by virtue of a pilot being a sneak thief and deviating a couple of degrees, made him jump on the wrong side of a lake. Otherwise he would have gotten away, I think. I'm pretty sure on that. So really knowing the pressure bump, we can say it made a big difference, but not really. Interestingly enough.
I would say that the two biggest factors, I think the pressure bump was important. To a larger, in a more macro level, I think him being first was the most important factor. Later on, authorities started catching on to the sort of, similar behavior that the other copycats had. But I think, and I've said this, and I think this is one of the biggest factors, is that Cooper remained inconspicuous for the predominance of the flight. And a lot of the other copycats were poorly disguised, screaming, cursing, drunk, waving weapons around. We clearly know Cooper didn't do that. Cooper has been described as calm, cool, and collected. I think a more accurate description would just be he just remained in control and controlled everybody. He remained in control of himself and therefore was able to control everybody around him. And didn't draw attention to himself, didn't make a scene, and was, able to get away with it. I think if Cooper had stood up and started waving a gun around or saying he had a bomb and everybody stay seated, and I think it would have gone very, very differently.
And I don't know what his calmness, it speaks to something about him. There is something in this personality profile that I think that does make a difference. And I don't want to say it's military training. It seems like you would say that. But again, Richard McCoy was a Green Beret, and he was panicked and uncomfortable doing this and was screaming, cussing, and threatening. So I don't want to just say it's, because he was military trained and, being under pressure. It could be that he was, it could speak to his criminality, in that he just understood that it was smart to maintain calm in a criminal situation, or it could be that his brain was off somewhere, that he just didn't give a damn. His give a damn button may have been completely shut off.
It's impossible to know. And wasn't Fisher, correct me if I'm wrong, described as calm and cool and collected, and he ended up backing out.
Yeah, he got scared to jump, but his actual
was too scared to jump in the end. But he was initially described by the crew as he was calm and cool, and
he's the closest. His hijacking is the closest analog to Cooper's. Honestly, he tried to be Cooper more than anybody else, I think.
Yeah. So there's a difference between being calm and cool and appearing calm and cool.
Right. Yeah. He appeared calm.
You know, I mean, there are times where I am racked with anxiety and appear completely normal. Sure. So, that's, that could be it too. So I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if his calm, cool, and collected stuff is overplayed, because there are numerous references where he is described as impatient. Sure. I think the crew describes him as getting a little itchy, getting a little antsy. Tina says that he got upset a few times. So it's not like he was on, Xanax the whole flight. I mean, there were times where he was amped up and impatient and upset. And, it doesn't mean he was banging and the window and yelling and screaming at Tina, but, he wasn't Mr. He wasn't Joe Montana through this whole flight.
No, I think that if you look at Tina's in her famous statement about how he was very nice, and that statement there, I think I've started to look at that in a certain way lately, that Tina clearly is an empath. Okay. She became a nun, a sister of mercy, basically. And then her entire career has been in social work. Like she makes soup kitchens and things. I mean, her entire job ever since being a flight attendant has been in social work. So she has a heart. She has a real servant's heart, and I think she's a real empathetic person. The fact that she prayed for the hijacker even speaks to something. But what I would say is that if you look at that footage of her and you really look at her face when she's saying that line about how he was impatient a few times, it seems like she is giving him, she's basically being polite. Even though this guy hijacked her, she's such a sweetheart that she does not want to just completely throw this guy under the bus, because he could have been a lot worse. And so she seemed to have, I think that people need to watch that clip again. Yeah. And you'll see her hesitation as like, well, I don't want to be cruel, but
there's a small detail a lot of people overlook. When Tina gets off the plane for the first time to pick up the money from Al Lee, Al Lee reports back that, and I forget the exact terminology, but she says that one's pretty sharp.
Yeah, he does.
Pretty sharp. And he only had a very, very brief interaction with her, and he was still able to say that one's sharp. She's sharp. She's, so Tina obviously carried herself very, very well, clearly conducted herself very, very well. And, I wonder how different the hijacking would have gone if any of the other flight attendants had sat next to him during the duration of the flight. Maybe not any, but you wonder.
Yeah, we have flight attendants and other hijackings losing it. I know that during Heinemann's flyjacking, during Heinemann, that's an interesting Freudian slip there. Yeah, during Heinemann's flyjacking. During Heinemann's hijacking, I know that one of the stewardesses became so upset that she left the plane. I think Heinemann himself or somebody was like, "Hey, get her off of here," because she was in hysterics. So it wasn't all glory and right. In composure for the stewardesses. So Tina gets credit for that. It wasn't just that. So somebody asks, how do we know that the tie was Cooper's? I suppose you mean as far as like on the flight. Well, for one thing, it was found in his seat. Literally, the FBI files say that upon boarding the aircraft or looking around, they say, well, laying in seat 18E was a black tie with a clip, So unless Cooper was sitting on somebody else's necktie for 5 hours, then that was his tie. Okay. And that's not even a real question. I mean, no offense to you. I'm just saying, I don't think it's debatable. Let's see.
I think also too, the question has arisen. Well, it might have been his tie on the flight, but was it his tie originally?
Yes, that's
Did he pick it up at a thrift store? There's no way to know.
No.
I mean, we don't know. We
No.
there's no way to know. We have to assume that it was his and he owned it for an indeterminate amount of time. But
I will say that we have kind of turned a corner, and especially with you, I know that because you've been this was kind of one of your things that what was it recently that there was something in the past year that has made you and myself really, and others negate. Something has happened that has negated the possibility of it being post hijacking contamination, the tie particles. Something.
That was correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was Drew's finding with the touch. Touch. Essentially what happens is if you think of the tie as, and Drew is going to message me later and cuss me out because I'm going to butcher this, but the tie, if you think about it in terms of three parts, the knot, the front, and then the sort of small back end, the predominant, if you look at the stubs, the predominance of the titanium and the other metals are on the knot.
Right.
Which indicates that Cooper touched those things, the titanium, rare earth metal stuff, whatever that was, surface or whatever, and then went and touched his knot to put the tie on, because you assume the knot is going to be the part of the tie that's going to be touched the most. The second most would be the front, and then the back part would be the least. And that's what the stubs indicate. Right. So it would appear that whoever owned the tie, presumably Cooper, it did not, that stuff, that material, the titanium and whatnot, did not get on the tie just like floating in the air and landing on the tie, or rubbing against particular surfaces. It was touch. It was on Cooper's fingers and then touched the tie, which I think is a huge discovery, a huge finding, and extremely informative. So, and I know very little about the tie. It's the chemistry stuff, metallurgy stuff is way above my head, but that I could understand.
But anything that removes extra ideas, I suppose, or if we remove any chance that it's post tie or that it's post hijack and contamination, that's big.
Right. And you talk about changing your mind. I've always been one that thought, it was probably contamination from the testing that the FBI did. Maybe it was contamination from Tom's testing. You get these modern, elements and metals on there. It was probably, something like that. Seeing that the predominance of the particles were on that knot, it was indicative of me that it wasn't from an FBI agent handling it. It wasn't from coming in contact with an electron microscope, that it was Cooper's fingers. And then that changed my mind on that. So yeah, it's a big discovery in my opinion. It indicates that it's not as if Cooper was strutting through some metallurgy lab or a fabrication plant and pieces were just kind of flying off and landing on the tie randomly. Or floating through the air, that he was actually touching these things that had these particles on it and then touching the tie to put it on.
And the images that I've seen lately, that I don't believe they've been released yet, but some of the images I've seen of the particle layout on the knot, you can even see almost the outline of fingers even.
Yeah. There's almost like a thumbprint, I think, like a thumb.
Yeah, you can see it.
We've had discussions about how you would put on a clip-on tie.
Right.
Yeah, I went to Catholic school for 8 years, and I wore a clip-on tie every school day for 8 years, and I put on a clip-on tie. And the way that I put it on was different than the way that you've put on clip-on ties. So I don't know. It's weird. But but that's not to say, what does that mean? I mean, okay, that's an interesting detail, but what does that really mean? What does that really tell us? I don't really know. That's where someone else who's got a bigger brain than me can come up with that. And hopefully the new analysis on the stubs will provide us a little more information on what's actually there, what's actually not. And maybe somebody can come up with some different ideas.
Okay. So Olivia again says, What do you think Cooper was doing for those 30 to 40 minutes after Tina last saw him and before he jumped? I would say that he was waiting to get past. I think anybody with any understanding of geography in that area knows that basically there's nothing in between Tacoma and the Lewis River area. Basically, it's just woods, deep, deep, deep woods. So I would say that I am not a subscriber of him jumping in Seattle. I don't think that, because I will say this: all the copycats jumped where they wanted to jump, except for McNally, who was just, again, Marty is such an outlier that he just doesn't count in a way because he was so out of his element, really. But the others jumped where they wanted to jump. And so there's no indication that Cooper didn't jump where he wanted to jump, which, again, he's jumping back where he started. And to me, that kind of makes sense that, he's jumping. And even that's in the transcripts. Even they even think that. They say, hey, we're flying back to Portland. One of the guys on there on the transcript says, hey, I guess we're taking him home or something, So they understood that immediately.
Maybe anyway. I think it was words like, maybe he'll get homesick.
Right.
And want to jump near Portland.
Yeah, because they want him off the plane as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. The only thing I would say is that, and I know we differ on this, and I don't want to get into this because I'll just end up cussing you out and shutting down the YouTube channel. But in terms of aviation, he did not define a flight path. Mm-hmm. So there's no way
nor speed
in my mind that would let him know, hey, this plane's going to take off from SeaTac and then fly over Lewis County and then Clark County and that way. It could have he could have thought it was going to fly straight down the Columbia, mm-hmm. So or over the coast. I mean, he really doesn't have a sense. I mean, I would assume because he demanded a 10,000 foot altitude that he knows they can't fly over the Cascades. Mm-hmm. We assume that because you'd pile into a side of a mountain. But there are other routes besides Victor 23 that can get you south. And it's not even we don't even know for sure. We're assuming that he knew what a flight path was, right, that there were these Victor 23 flight paths. We're assuming that. There's nothing to indicate that. So, we don't know if he even knew where he was when he jumped. That's a big assumption. And we're just assuming that he knew the flight path.
Yeah.
And you're 10,000 feet in the air in the dark and it's raining and it's cloudy. That's a big assumption. So, I tend to be kind of on this. The thing that's interesting to me is that within 5 minutes of that plane taking off, Tina said he was ready to go.
Sure.
And those are her words, that in her mind, he was getting ready to jump. And that's by the time she got back to the cockpit, which was very, very early on after takeoff. So if he's ready to jump at, say, 7, and I can look on the chronology here, but 7:45, let's say, then why wait until 8:13 to jump? Well, and he doesn't know where he is, doesn't know where the plane is necessarily, making a big assumption that he knows where the plane is flying. I don't know.
Well, what's interesting about Cooper is that I've said this several times. Hetty, Heineman, McCoy, and even Mac, to some degree, specified flight paths to follow. And there was no disadvantage to giving them a flight path because the question was never, it's not like they were going to lose the aircraft. They knew where that plane was. Yeah. Sorry, Eric. They knew where the plane was at all times. Yeah. So there was no disadvantage to saying. The issue was when you're going to jump, not where the plane is. So he could have specified Victor 23 or given them degrees or whatever, and it would not have hurt him in the least.
Yeah. And it's important to remember too, that his original demand was Mexico City.
Yeah.
And you can take Victor 23 all the way from Seattle to San Diego. It terminates in San Diego. But by kind of doglegging over to Reno, it changed the flight path a little bit, changed the route a little bit. But and Drew made this point on his episode on the Cooper Vortex with Darren, that the maximum range of a 727 is about Seattle to Mexico City.
It is. Yeah.
And but it appears as if Cooper did not calculate the effect that the drag from the landing gear down and the flaps, etc., would have on fuel expenditure. So to me, that kind of indicates sort of a rookie mistake where he assumed that, hey, it's, I'm going to have this plane fly from Seattle to Mexico City, but I'm going to jump out over Washington State, and the FBI is going to spend the next, 50 years looking over a 2,000-mile long flight path.
Mm-hmm.
When all he indicated was Seattle to Mexico City, he didn't indicate where he wanted it. I want you to stay over California. I want you to fly over Nevada. None of that mattered to him. I'm not sure he really knew where that plane was, other than maybe he hoped that it was heading south.
Yeah, exactly. But so to answer Olivia's question, I would say that what he was doing back there, I say he was waiting until Portland, really, or because I just think that it's not hard to spot huge cities in the clouds. I mean, even in rainy conditions, it's lit up. So I just think he was waiting to get closer back to. It just seems that it would make sense that he jumps back where he started, because remember I said all these guys jumped where they wanted to jump. So
and that's true, and that's absolutely possible. That's absolutely possibility. I don't disagree with you there. To answer that, what he was doing for 30, 40 minutes, I really don't know. And that's a real mystery to me, because if he's ready to jump, then why not jump? He's got, other than the fact that he had a little bit of trouble getting the air stairs down, and ask them to slow it down a little bit. He was ready to go. So why he waited, I don't know. Maybe he looked out and he was like, dang, it's freaking dark. Or he could have been like Fisher and been like, had some second thoughts, and was contemplating his life and was scared. We don't know, the other thing I thought is maybe he had this set up and then kind of looked around and said, you know what? I don't have this jerry rigged right. I don't want to jump with this leash. I want to secure it more tightly to my body. And he spent 30 or 40 minutes jerry rigging it again, second guessing himself. I don't know.
Okay. Next question. Do you have any updates about do you have any updates about your FOIA request with regard to the hair sample? Yeah, it's closed. They closed it. I don't know why. They're supposed to give you an indication when they close something. I've had other requests closed and they say why. Oh, well, we can't say this or that, but mysteriously, I get a thing that just says closed, and it doesn't say why at all. It just says closed. So no, my hair slide FOIA is dead at the moment. My conspiracy theory is that they found it, and that is the source of perhaps maybe DNA that they have recovered recently. Maybe, I don't know, but fingers crossed. I hope so. But because again, they're not going to tell us. That was something that I always discussed. Is I said, look, my FOIA on this, if it is successful, they're not going to tell us. We're not going to find out until later on, maybe never. But so, because, why would they? They have no obligation to tell us anything about what they're doing. So if they found it, they might say, hey, hat tip to the nerd who advised us about this and made us go look for it. And we found it, but they're never going to tell us that. So I don't know. Maybe it's.
And as you well know, you cannot FOIA a physical piece of evidence.
No.
I mean, that's why Eric's lawsuit against the FBI failed, is you cannot FOIA a piece of physical evidence. You can FOIA documents and things like that, but it's not like you can FOIA, Dillinger's gun or something.
Right.
So it'd be it's not like they're going to send you the hair slide in the mail in a manila envelope. But I think the effort behind that was to try to shake some branches and hopefully have them go look for it and jog their memory a little bit. And maybe that happened.
Okay. Stool Boom, which sounds like a wrestling name there, Chris. Stool Boom.
He's not somebody I'd want to wrestle. Stool Boom. I'd hate to know what their finishing move is.
Yeah, I know. This guy's a cousin to Metal Chair Slap. I guess. What is the significance of DB Cooper working in the aerospace industry? Is it only that it gives him a possible tie-in to him knowing the aft stairs could be deployed in flight, or are there other reasons? Well, we don't know, but the tie certainly seems to have aerospace-ish particles on it, perhaps. But the significance, I don't know.
Now, let me ask you, the FBI sort of kind of suspected that Cooper may have been in the
Yes.
And way before the tie.
Oh, yeah.
Way before the tie particles, they sort of suspected that he was in the aerospace, aviation, manufacturing industry.
Because of the unemployment going on in the country, in the West Coast, of all these types of aerospace. I mean, the aerospace industry was in a super depression. Forget the number of it, but it was something like astonishing. It was like 40,000 engineers were unemployed in 1971 in the West Coast, aerospace engineers. So
the last person out of Seattle turn out the lights.
Correct. It was basically a disaster for that industry. So I think that his just appearance made them think that. And like you said, this is before the tie particles, so maybe there's something to that. But I would say that the only people who would have known, I mean, there were Boeing engineers who were aware of the stairs could come down in flight. That was somewhat known. I mean, it wasn't, we've learned a lot more recently that there were more avenues than we had originally thought to where Cooper, I mean, it was in the paper. And honestly, there is, Chris Broers found it. I mean, and I believe Flyjack found it too at some point, that, there in like the Kansas City Tribune, there was on the front page in like 67 or 68, a 727 with cargo coming out the back of it, up from the stairs. So who knows? So.
Yeah. And Drew made a point too that, and this has been talked about before, that the particles on the tie seem to point away from an aerospace angle and more toward a metallurgy research laboratory angle. I don't know how true that is because I don't know much about the tie particles in that detail. But it seems he mentions that vanadium is something that is very present in aerospace and is not found a whole lot on the tie.
Well, I like Chris Broer's idea too, that if this guy worked in a manufacturing plant, you would see a lot of the same material on the tie because these manufacturing plants were assembly lines essentially. So you would see a lot of the same thing, right? You wouldn't see so many differing things. You would see a lot of consistency because it's just some guy, stamping out a press or something, right? So I like that idea too. So that does kind of indicate more front end metals research. Let's see. Lionheart says, what could the FBI and law enforcement have done differently in this case? Do you feel this was a botched case? Chris, do you think this was a botched case?
Well, Lionheart is another wrestling reference. Chris Jericho, the Lionheart.
Okay.
So I'm sensing a trend. I do not believe this is a botched case.
I agree.
I don't. I think the FBI worked tirelessly. I think they did absolutely the best that they could. Did they do everything perfectly? No. Did they make mistakes? Certainly. I do not think that those mistakes were based on incompetence or lack of effort. As I've mentioned before, the FBI agents back in 1971 were predominantly attorneys and accountants, and you're asking them to solve a sky heist, that involved airplanes and parachuting and drop zones and drift and radar and all of these things that they were not equipped to deal with at the time. And they had to outsource a great deal of the expertise to people like the NWA,
Earl Casey,
Air Force, Earl Casey, et cetera, and relied on those experts. So, oh my gosh, the name escapes me. The guy on the Tina Bar, the Palmer.
Oh yes,
there's another one that they relied on. So I don't think it's a botched case. I think the FBI did the best that they could. I think they worked tirelessly. I think they followed up every lead. Do I think they got to a point where it got tiresome and aggravating and boring for the FBI and they felt it was a dead end and a cold case and maybe it's never going to be solved and it's more of a pain in the ass than it's worth? Yes, I do think it got to that point, but I don't fault the FBI at all for the fact that this case remains unsolved.
No, I agree with you completely. You cannot spend as much effort as someone like myself does in the FBI files and come away thinking that they weren't trying, or that's just ridiculous. They wanted to solve the case. They really, really did. Yeah. But the problem was that they ran out of their own leads. They became very passive, but by virtue of there's nothing else to investigate.
Right.
They
Which
ran out of
later
ideas.
led to Larry Carr in what was it, 2008, I believe.
Yeah.
He came out and was like, let's put some information out into the public and see if we can get some new leads, from the public at this point. Because as he said, the vast majority of crimes like these are solved because they get a tip from the public. Unfortunately that didn't really happen. Although I think that the information Larry did share publicly was extremely valuable and has moved the case forward, even if it hasn't been solved.
No, Larry's outreach is the reason I'm here. It's the reason why a lot of people are in the vortex, because they just got into it around that time because it was on the news. And so Larry's extraordinarily important for this case.
Agreed.
But I don't fault. It's like faulting them for destroying the cigarettes. Sure. I mean, I still think that it seems like, I guess they learned from their mistakes too, with the other hijackers. I know that if you look at the Heinemann files and the McCoy files, like people maybe don't understand, but there are FBI files, just like for Cooper. There are stacks of FBI files for the McCoy hijacking, for Heinemann. When you read through those, you see the differences. You see that they were more careful with collecting evidence from the plane. In fact, with McCoy, they removed his entire row of seats and took it with them to research or to investigate his seats. So they did that. But no, I don't think there's anything that they could have done differently. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Somebody said, this is a good one. Drew says, why should we assume the Elenor ghost lead is untrue? Did Cameron capitalize or even attempt to capitalize on it? Is there any explanation to why he'd make it up? Well, I'll take this one, having just made a Elenor video. Why would we assume the Elenor ghost lead is untrue? But this is a hard thing to answer, because you're saying untrue when it's not. It can be both. It can be true. In my opinion, I think this happened, but I think that he was misinterpreting what was going on. I do think somebody was at that drop zone, and I don't think he made it up. Again, he had no reason to make it up. He knows lying to the FBI and wasting their resources is a crime, and he had no reason to. He could not capitalize on it. Again, when you give the FBI a lead that they investigate, they're going to tell you, "Hey, don't tell this to anybody, because if it gets back to the hijacker, he's going to know that we're on to him, or that we're investigating this particular avenue, and he might try to do something to obfuscate it." So he's not going to tell it. He never did. I have the 1972, the issues that came after of his magazine. He doesn't talk about it at all. So because he can't. Now, he may have discussed it with people at the drop zone, but that's different than broadcasting it in a magazine or whatever. I don't think he had anything to benefit from it. I think the event happened, and I think that he began to question himself once he saw all the effort. I mean, because they pulled 12,000 cards. That's a lot of FBI man hours that they spent on this.
Yeah, and it's important to get a little context around Lyle Cameron, the person too. Lyle Cameron was a former cop. Yeah. He was an FBI confidential informant. He knew probably better than anyone that lying to the FBI was a federal crime.
Right.
And he had a reputation in the parachuting community as sort of a goody two shoes, bit of a narc. He did. I get the sense that he didn't like these long-haired hippies coming in and smoking the weed and, doing that sort of stuff. I think it wasn't his style, and didn't like that at all. So, that's the kind of person that Lyle Cameron was.
He's a very serious person. He's not a trickster.
And I don't question his integrity or his honesty in any way, shape, or form. So, I have a theory about why he told the FBI that, though, and this is just pure speculation on my part.
I'd like to hear it.
So let me just preface by saying this is total speculation on my part. But I wonder if his disdain for this new generation, these young kids smoking the devil's lettuce, dropping LSD, and kind of sullying his beloved sport of parachuting, skydiving, if he thought, you know what, well, you want to smoke your weed and you want to take your LSD and all of this sort of stuff. Well, I'm going to get the FBI in here and I'm going to have them poke around and nose around and maybe, ruffle your feathers a little bit and see how much you like that. And maybe the FBI will come in and bust a few of you for drug smuggling or possession or whatever the case may be. The timing is peculiar too, because I believe it was less than a year before he was voted out as president of the USPA.
Not less than a year, like way less than a year. It was January 72 when that happened.
And that's because he ratted out the USPA. I think it was the Olympic.
Whatever their competition team was.
Right, the American competition parachuting team. He ratted them out for drugs. And that came, it might have been January of 72.
Something is January 72.
Yeah. So the timing is very peculiar. So it makes me wonder if maybe he tried to connect this particular incident with Cooper to get the FBI in there and kind of, maybe roil the youngsters who were smoking weed and doing that sort of stuff. Complete speculation on my part.
I would say that for me, why should we assume the Elsinore ghost lead is untrue? The best answer if you've seen my video is the existence of Paul Cini. I cannot get to a place where I think that Cooper was not a copycat. It's just not. The FBI never even gave it a second thought,
right?
Because they understood copycat mentality. That is a real, very real thing. And to think that two guys were having the exact same, novel idea for a heist at the exact same time is just a little far-fetched.
And the other thing too is the FBI researched. They got all of the cards they went through, what was it, 400 and something cards, names of people who had registered at Elsinore, and then they eliminated it down to like 18, and then they eliminated all of those. So anybody who would have gone through Elsinore and jumped at Elsinore during the time period that Cameron says they did, you would think the FBI would have stumbled across their card and their name and found it, and that didn't happen. So I don't know. I don't have an easy answer for Cameron other than that. So
I just came across this great, as far as your comment about how lawyers and accountants were members of the FBI back then, Drew Daniel writes, now we have lawyers and accountants trying to solve it for fun. And it's interesting. I've actually had this conversation with you, Chris, that there's no difference really in what we're doing and what they did. They had more research. They had more resources. They had obviously the resources of the federal government behind their back, but arguably we have way more resources than they had because we have the internet. So, but there's no difference. These were just men who were our age, who were just doing a job. And hey, your job is to find this guy. Here's a stack of evidence to go through. And they just sat there and read through the files just like we do. So really, there's no, when we say that, they didn't do this or that, those guys are just like us. There's no real difference. I mean, they had the ability to go question people, but their brain, the way they process the information is going to be the same way we do.
Yeah, and just like they did, we have to outsource our expertise. I mean, that's why we talk to people like Mike Vining. That's why we talk to people like Alfred Friedberg. That's why we talk to hydrologists and people like that, is because we don't know. I don't know. So it's why it's important to talk to people who know more about a particular topic than we do. And that's the same thing the FBI was doing back in the day.
Yeah. And Nikki Breton points out here that he says it's a far cry from Cini to Norjack. And it was not the exact same. And Cini didn't even choose a jumpable plane. That makes no difference. It's still the concept is what matters.
Yeah. And I think Cooper could have looked at Cini and said, what a buffoon. I can do that so much better.
Hold my beer.
Yeah.
Like that's really, no, you don't have to have the exact same scenario. It's a concept for the heist, a parachute skydive escape. That's all it requires.
Right. And as you pointed out, both can be true. The Elsinore ghost could exist and Cooper could have been inspired by Cini. That doesn't mean that the Elsinore ghost and Cooper were the same guy. And to be fair, Cameron equivocated and he kind of went back to the FBI and said, on second thought, it may have been, I may have been thinking of this magazine article and this advertisement. And, it may not. I'm not sure. So who knows?
Yeah. See, Jay Weiss says, so many witnesses and not one can identify Cooper from all the suspects, including Braden. Maybe someone is covering up who Cooper was. No.
Who?
Who? Why?
Who's covering him up?
Right. The powers that be is not a right answer.
Yeah. Maybe that's glib, but it's who's covering him up and for what purpose?
Motive.
I mean, the FBI clearly tried to interview everybody they could. By all accounts, they even interviewed the Air America smoke jumpers who were working for the CIA. So it's not like there were certain things that were off limits. I don't know who would be covering it up, and I don't know for what purpose.
Yeah, and again, about the witnesses not recognizing them after all these, or not being able to spot Cooper in a picture. Like that
means they just didn't see his picture,
right? Or they forgot what he looked like. We have. I believe I say it a million times, but I believe it's late 72. We have Tina saying that Cooper's face is becoming foggy in her memory. And then we have in 76, Flo, who I think is our best witness actually to Cooper's face. Flo says, hey, I stopped showing me photographs because I could maybe be in the same room with the guy and recognize him, but this is useless. So this is in 76. And I always talk about Bill Mitchell saying, would you recognize the face of a substitute teacher you had in 5th grade? Like, no, he had no, it's just not. So I don't buy that. I just think that's, see, somebody asks about total newbie question. But did DB leave the Sky Chef matchbook behind?
Well, I'm going to let you answer this because you shared with me your wonderful new find
about
the matchbook that
I have a find or a
the Sky Chef matchbook.
Oh, I found one. I just found one. I got one online, but
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, right.
So, yeah.
Okay. But I would say that no, he did not leave it behind. In fact, he took everything with him except for his tie. That's the only thing that Cooper brought onto the plane that was left on the plane. In fact, Tina threw away the Sky Chef matchbook when it ran out of matches. And it's more evidence that Cooper was a smoker. Clearly he ran out of matches on the plane. So he had a matchbook that was mostly used. So he's not fake smoking. If he was fake smoking, he'd have a brand new matchbook. He wouldn't have a used matchbook. The Sky Chef matchbook was pretty, we don't know how many matches he had in that, how many matches that she struck from it, but she ran out. It was empty and she threw it away. And he said, oh, don't throw that away. Give it back to me. So he took it with him, but that's the evidence that he wasn't, the fake smoking thing. That's just.
There is a question here, and I hate to hijack, pardon the expression, hijack your podcast here, but there's a question from someone, and they said, is it unusual? Why are the sketches, the two popular sketches, so different? And is it normal for a cold case to have different sketches like that? I think it's a good question. I'll let you answer the question as far as why are they different. But what I will say as far as other cold cases, because I have interests in other cold cases, and I'll point out that the Delphi murders of the two girls in Delphi, Indiana, that was just recently, there was a recent arrest. I won't say it was solved, but there was an arrest. That the two sketches that were produced in that case are completely different. So it is not unusual for a cold case like that to have wildly different, vastly different sketches. So, but I do find it enraging that the Cooper case has two sketches that are so different, really,
they're different people.
Yeah, they really are. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the sketches because that's your wheelhouse.
Okay. Basically, what we have is a error on the FBI. Again, they're not perfect. We have a mistake the FBI made. Okay. This is unquestionable. This is not, I don't care what anybody says. You cannot debate this. This is an actual thing that we have. If you just look at the files, you'll see it. It's in plain English, everything. Basically, we have composite A, which is this, we have this sketch here, with the famous sketch here. So this sketch was created by Roy Rose while all 3 stewardesses sat there with him in Minneapolis on November, I think the 26th, the 27th. I think it's the 27th actually. But so we have Roy Rose drawing this with them. This is the only sketch, not the one with Cooper's eyes. This one is the only sketch that was drawn from the eyewitnesses sitting there watching the guy draw it. Okay. So if he was weird looking, if there was something they didn't like, they would have told him in real time, hey, his nose is too little, his lip is too weird. They would have said these things. Okay. So then what happens is, time goes by and they start brainstorming in about March of 72. They're going, well, what can we do different to help out? And Charlie Farrell is going through some files and he comes across a file where Florence Schaffner says, this sketch is terrible. I do not like this sketch. It's horrible. It's a terrible rendition of Cooper, yada, yada, yada. And we can look at the timestamp, the date of it. And it's very obvious that she's referring to this sketch, okay, which was the very first sketch made. This was not shown to the public. This was created the night of the hijacking without any witness assistance. This was just basically somebody drawing it from the descriptions that were released, okay? Just a drawing, okay? So she's referring to this drawing, saying it sucks, okay? Because we have Florence Schaffner discussing the Bing sketch, and she says it's a good likeness, likes the drawing very much, is what she says. We have Tina Mucklow saying it looks 100% like him. We have Alice calling it a good likeness. Okay, so we have them saying that they like the Bing sketch. So clearly, but you look at the dates, and when Flo says this sketch sucks, she's referring to this guy here. Okay, Farrell, for some reason, is not. This sketch existed for so little time that they almost forgot. The FBI basically forgot it existed. So it's when she says the original sketch.
Was that even public? Did they even put that? I
Never.
don't even think they put that original sketch out for the
They
public.
did not. No. And so Farrell thinks for whatever reason that she's referring to the Bing sketch. So we had this memo. We actually have the document where Farrell writes to DC saying, hey, look, can we borrow Roy Rose again? I've come across something that says, or one of the stewardesses says that the sketch stinks. We should improve the sketch. Now, they had been saying for a while that they wanted to improve it by making him older, because they had been getting those complaints a little bit that, hey, the Bing sketch looks too young. Let's age him up a little bit. But because he thought that she was saying that the sketch that Bing sucks, they decided to completely overhaul the sketch. Just completely overhaul it instead of just aging the Bing sketch up, which is what they probably should have done. Mm-hmm. Again, all 3 stewardesses said they liked the Bing sketch. They sat there while the guy drew it. So why would it be such a far cry? Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, by the time they make Comp B, it is the first time they see Comp B is, I believe, either in August or September of 72. So almost a full year later, they're seeing this sketch. And they say, oh, yeah, that looks like him. That looks good, yada, yada, yada. But again, they said the same thing about the Bing sketch while they sat there as he drew it 2 days after the hijacking. Mm-hmm. So, yes, we do have them saying, oh, Comp B is a good sketch. It looks like him. It's as good of a likeness as you can make. But we have them saying the same thing about Bing sketch. There's no, the only sketch that any of the stewardesses, other than this weird first one, the only sketch that any stewardess kind of doesn't like is the hoodlum sketch, which Tina says it doesn't look like him much at all. And then we have Alice saying it looks like a hoodlum. Cooper was more refined than that. So that's really the only one that they didn't like as far as official sketches go. But no, so yes, we have 2 different sketches. They look like different people. And we have the stewardesses saying that they like both of them. So how do you decide which one's more accurate? Well, again, I just always feel like you should go. You should always go with the one that was closest to the event. And if they're saying 2 days later this sketch is 100% like him, well, then I'm going to go with that one. Okay, the frailty of memory. I know that they say they like comp B, but well, by God, they say they like comp A days after the hijacking. So I'm going to err on that one being more accurate just by default because it's closer to the event. Would you agree?
Yes, agreed, 100%. And the as you've said, the problem with Bing is that it's too young. I mean, it looks like a 12-year-old boy to me. It's very, very young. It does not look like a middle-aged man in any way, shape, or form to me. So if you could take Bing and age him up, then I think you're probably on the right track to what Cooper looked like.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to do with my sketches. I've tried to make this guy Bing sketchy a little bit and make him a little older, and give him the skin too, because you can't tell his complexion.
Yep, and the pouty lower lip.
Yeah, Bing is missing a few things. And Bing has the lower lip to a point. I mean, he does. So, but again, his nose is so tiny.
It's like a 1988 Michael Jackson nose.
It is, and but it's interesting. But again, as I've said, Roy Rose drew the nose that they told him to draw. Okay, he did not. Roy Rose did not invent. He didn't just say, "Oh, I'm gonna make his nose look like this." He's not Michelangelo painting cherubs out of his imagination. He's trained to draw what they tell him to draw. Yeah. So, and again, repeatedly.
Yeah.
In the files, we have small nose in the file.
And as I said, I've looked into lots of cold cases and seen a lot of sketches. And Roy Rhodes is one of the best sketch artists out there.
Absolutely.
His sketches look terrific compared to some nonsense that I have seen put out there by others.
Yeah, there's just no reason to think that there's just no reason to think that there's no reason to think that it's a bad sketch other than, here's an example. Here we go. Here's Heinemann sketch there, right? So that's close. That's Roy Rose as well. So that's a lot closer than people might think. That's pretty good actually. Yeah. But no, the sketches, I go with comp A just because that's just where it's just closer to the event.
Yeah. And I would say an aged Bing, an aged comp A is probably the sweet spot.
Yep. Okay, good. Who is a fan of Ralph Himmelsbach? Well, I would say I'm a fan of the fact that he flew P-51s and tried to shoot down German fighter pilots in World War II. That's pretty cool. But Ralph was boy. You have to read my book, people. I have uncovered some things where there was some animosity between different offices about Ralph Himmelsbach. He was a self-promoter, and it rubbed people in Seattle the wrong way because, hey, this is our case.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that there are self-promoters in the Cooper case?
Well, yeah. He was definitely one of them. And what's funny, though, is the pot calling the kettle black. I came across an article yesterday where Ralph Himmelsbach's bitching about Richard Tusaw, saying all he cares about is his own publicity. I'm like, well, who's looking at the man in the mirror here, Ralph? Yeah, that's funny. So, all right, let's see. Okay, we're not saying that. Okay, where we have questions. Let's see. Give us a second.
Packer brought up a little question here. He said he and I and Chris Brower have been kind of talking about this. This isn't exactly a new topic. It's been discussed in the past, but the idea of the possibility of the Tina Bar money arriving not via the river or via direct human means, but that it actually ended up in a sand pit or a quarry,
a gravel pit
somewhere along the flight path. In fact, there is a gravel sand operation directly underneath the flight path called Cadman Incorporated.
It's south of Orchards or north of Orchards. I think it's maybe south of in Orchards, maybe. I'm not sure.
I think it's
next to the airfield.
It's very close to Shoals Airfield.
Shoals, yes. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So very close to that. So, the theory is that the money could have become detached from Cooper or landed in that sand pit, become buried in the sand. And then, later on at some point that money was dug up and loaded into a dump truck and taken to Tina Bar to the Fazio sand operation. and spread out on the beach. Also, the possibility, I know Packers looked into the possibility of it being loaded onto barges and taken down the Columbia. So that kind of investigation is in its infancy, and we don't have any direct link to those other sand pits and the Fazio sand operation. But I think it's a really interesting possibility, and it really shook me when I found that sand pit directly underneath the flight path, Cadman Incorporated. But I have not been able to find a direct link between them and the Fazio sand operation. But it's a thought. I've always believed that it was sort of a natural arrival, but I'm open-minded. I mean, if we can determine that there is a connection between one of these gravel operations or sand operations and the Fazios, and then hey, I'm down. I'm down for it. So I think it's a really interesting thought.
Darren's a good one. Okay, Darren asks, what documentary book podcast has spread the most misinformation on the case?
Oh, the Cooper Vortex.
Yeah, okay.
Terrible. It's just
people hanging off fish line from airplanes.
No, the Cooper Vortex is awesome. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yes. But no, I would say that either the real McCoy or the Colbert book has spread the most misinformation, because those were widely read, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Or not, the real McCoy wasn't widely read, but I would say it's been widely looked at and disseminated by people with a agenda to promote McCoy.
Agreed. I think any book written with an agenda like that is probably going to have misinformation. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, here's a good one from Miss Olivia again. Is there anyone involved in this case who's no longer alive that you wish you could have spoken to?
I have an answer.
Yes.
I would like to speak to Paul Soderlund.
I figured.
Yep, I would like to talk to Paul Soderlund, and I'm really envious of Richard Tusaw, who apparently spoke to Paul at length and interviewed him for his book.
Explain who Paul Soderlund is for everybody.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Paul Soderlund was the director of NWA Director of Flight Operations Technical. He's arguably the greatest pilot of the last 60 years. He was on the short list of nominees for Ronald Reagan's FAA administrator. Back in, I think, 1980 or 81.
He's in the Aviation Hall of Fame.
He's remarkable aviator, top-notch pilot. He invented the systems that are now used to detect turbulence in aircraft, so that aircraft don't fly through bad turbulence and all kinds of stuff. His resume and his accolades are legendary. And he was at the epicenter of the Cooper investigation from the very beginning. He was on the radio with the crew during the course of the hijacking. He was the one that was trying to determine when and where Cooper jumped. He worked with the FBI, hand in glove. He was right at the epicenter of the whole investigation. He interviewed the pilots after the hijacking privately, as part of the company interview. And he flew the same 727 on the sled test in January of 72. So you talk about a guy who was enmeshed in Norjack, and it's Paul Soderlund. And I would just love to sit and talk to that guy, ask him questions about everything. His calculations on the drop zone, his just everything. Yeah. And I do find it interesting. We talked about Tusaw earlier and how his book has gained more credibility in recent years, and that, maybe he wasn't full of crap after all. And one of the things that's important to note is in Tusaw's book, Soderlund is quoted as saying that his calculations bring the drop zone all the way to the Columbia River. And there's a section in the book where Tusaw was like, well, wait a minute. Are you sure? Do that again, calculate it again. And he did it again. And he said, yeah, brings it to the Columbia. And he says, Soderlund says, I'm not surprised about that at all. So, if that's true, And Soderlund believes that the drop zone can be extended all the way to the Columbia. Boy, that's an interesting piece of evidence. So, because he's the guy that did it from the beginning. But yeah, he'd be my guy. What about you?
I would say because of my involvement with the FBI investigation, writing a book about the actual investigation, I would say it's probably Charlie Farrell, who was the original case agent. And he was the case agent during the most aggressive years. So he was the case agent from 71 to 78, maybe. So during the height of it all, he was the main guy. So I would say him for that reason. As far as other people, Hal Williams, would be a good one. He, other than the stewardesses, he's the only one who had somewhat of a reason to look at Cooper with a little bit of a discerning eye, because he was trained. Now, this was during the era where there was little airport security, because the issue was who was going to pay for it. Is the government going to pay for airport security, or is the airlines going to pay for airport security? And the airlines had begun to start training gate agents to recognize hijackers. And I'm pretty positive that Hal Williams had some training in that. And he did recognize Cooper to a point. He noticed him acting a little different, but it wasn't enough to raise any alarm bells. But he did notice what he was doing in the concourse, which is more than you could say for some random passenger. So he was looking at him. And I would say he came face to face with him too. He's the only male other than Dennis Lindsay really didn't pay much attention. He admitted it. But Hal had a reason to pay attention to this guy. And Cooper came face to face with no sunglasses on with Hal Williams as he gave Hal Williams his ticket. And so they stood face to face. And so Hal's height, even Hal's height estimate of 6'1", shouldn't be overlooked, because he was the only man we know of who was paying attention to Cooper, who was standing face to face with Cooper. So that speaks to something. So I would say Hal would be interesting, just to kind of get more of what he thought.
Yeah, Captain Scott, I think, would be a good one too.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, but remarkably, a lot of these people are still alive. Radicek, Anderson, all three flight attendants. Yeah. So let's see. There was a good one. Okay, he keeps asking it, and I'll answer it. Majike says, what are both of your opinions on Flo's comments in Jeffrey Gray's book Skyjack, where she says that she thinks Tina is hiding something? Bruce recently said the same thing on his podcast, or on this podcast. I don't understand. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
Yeah.
I do not think Tina is hiding anything. I think Tina told everything she possibly could to the FBI. In fact, she gave her initial statement to the FBI and then called them later on and said, you know what? Some other things have occurred to me. I'd like to meet with you again, which she did not have to do. So, and I feel bad for Tina, because I think in the years she's had those aspersions cast on her, and I don't think they're fair. I think Tina is not an accomplice in this. I think she's a victim in all of this. And I think it's too bad that she's, had her kind of reputation besmirched a little bit. I don't see any evidence that she is hiding anything, that she's being duplicitous. She was caught in the middle of a terrible situation, did the best she could through it, and then tried to move on with her. She cooperated fully with the investigation and then tried to move on with her life, which is exactly what any law-abiding citizen would do, is do the best you can through this ordeal, cooperate fully with the law enforcement officials, and then try to move on with your life. So I can't fault her for that.
No, Tina's doing no. Yeah, I don't see anything that she's hiding. I don't know why Flo would say that. Maybe.
Do you get the sense that there's a little dissension in the ranks with the flight attendants? That there's some, I don't know.
I don't know if it's
tension or problems or distrust or dislike. I don't know. I always got the sense maybe that Flo didn't care for Tina, or
yeah, she didn't. I don't know what their problem.
And I know that Flo had problems with Radicek too. Of course, Radicek told her to for lack to lack of a better term, get the hell off the plane right now, get your asses off the plane. And she did not take kindly to that.
No.
And kind of held a grudge against Radicek. So I wonder if there's a little bit of tension between her and Tina, but pure speculation on my part.
Well, she felt that Tina, she didn't like, if you read Skyjack, she says that Tina proselytized to her a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Tina was very religious, and the stewardesses had to share hotel rooms.
Yeah.
The pilots and the engineers got their own rooms, but stewardesses had to share their own hotel rooms. And so I think that she didn't like being, proselytized to by Tina. Mm-hmm. And also, but Flo, look, here's something that we need to remember. Flo left Northwest Airlines not long after. She leaves in like late spring or summer of 72. The others were with it for a little bit longer. Tina was with it till 1979 or 1980 even, was with Northwest. So Flo moves on to Frontier Airlines in Denver for whatever reason. She does that. So, but Tina's not hiding anything. I just don't see why. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Why she would, I mean, she fully participates and she admits her faults. Even she's like, look, she's concerned. She's like, I don't want to lead anybody astray. She knows the power that she has, and it kind of irks her. She doesn't want to make mistakes. She's scared of leading them astray. And no, I don't think she's,
no,
I don't think there's
no. And there's someone in the comments suggesting that she was flirting with Cooper. There's absolutely no evidence of that at all. I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of flirting. I don't think that lighting someone's cigarettes and trying to get information about where they're from, to assist in the investigation is flirting, but no, there's no evidence of flirting at all between the two. So, yeah, Tina's a victim.
Yeah. Jack again says, why did Mary Doey get the Cross of Valor? That was the stewardess in the Pausanias situation. Why did Mary Doey get this Cross of Valor and get to meet the Queen for her bravery, but Tina didn't? Well, we don't have a queen.
Nope.
In America, so that's why Tina didn't meet royalty.
America.
No, and again, Tina Mucklow is one of hundreds of flight attendants who were hijacked in that airtime in a 5-year stretch.
Yes,
Canadian hijackings were rare.
Not only did they not get any type of award, Donald Nyrop, who was the president of Northwest Airlines, basically put them back to work right away and never gave them any kind of bonus, award, anything. It was back to work.
I see. Alex has a good one. Where did Alex's statement go? Alex had one. He was saying, is there a Madame Tussauds for DB Cooper? No, I don't know that I know of, but we do have this in the Air Museum. What do they call the place in Seattle where we go to?
Boeing
Aviation
Boeing
Museum or something.
Something of flight.
Museum of Flight. Yes, they do have this one, and there is our friend, fellow skyjacker Martin McNally,
and he's just to be clear, McNally's on the right, Cooper's on the left.
Right. What's funny is Mac had to actually jump a gate. Poor old Mac, he's 80 years old. He like jumped a gate to get over. Like no one's supposed to be over there with Cooper.
No.
And his sister, she's going, Marty, stop it, Marty, what are you doing? And he's like, who's gonna stop me?
Yeah. I tell you, my son attended my middle son attended CooperCon with me last year, and I have a great picture of him talking to Martin McNally with that sort of statue of Cooper in the foreground. And it's just, for me, it's a really memorable picture, a statue of a skyjacker. And then my son speaking to a real life skyjacker. It was just a very cool picture.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Sorry if someone's already asked this. I just got off work. But after Bill, who would you say is the best witness out of the passengers? It's a good question.
I'm going to let you take this because this is your wheelhouse here.
I would say Robert Gregory. I don't know. He's so detailed that either he has an amazing memory or he's just completely an old man who's crazy. He was 70 years old. I don't know how good his eyesight was at 70, but he was his career, Robert Gregory, he had been a paint store owner. That was his bread and butter, was paint. So he was somebody who had an eye for detail. So perhaps he's correct. And actually, I would say he gets some things wrong in his 302, but interestingly, the person who sat closest to Cooper for the longest length of time that's Tina Mucklow, says that Cooper's suit was brown. Okay. Everybody else, every other witness says, oh, he's wearing black, whatever, except Robert Gregory. Robert Gregory says his suit's russet colored. And he had an overcoat on, but a suit underneath it that was russet colored. So to me, that's kind of almost confirmation that his eye was good enough to spot the color and be the only witness to spot the color, except for Tina. So that seems to like lend some credibility to his accuracy as a witness. So I would say, other than Bill, Robert Gregory, yeah.
Yeah, I'll bow to your better knowledge on that one.
Well, and also Gregory claims this, and I don't know why he would lie. I just don't. Gregory says that Tina told him at some point, don't look at him, or don't look at that guy, or something like that. Now, I don't know when that would have been, or why she would have said that, because that only would have drawn attention to him. When Tina's trying to keep anybody from knowing about a hijacking, I'm not sure why she would say, hey, don't look at that guy there.
But when would she have the chance to do that, though?
Don't know.
I mean, she's sitting next to him for virtually the entire time, except for when she's getting up.
Well, now, Gregory doesn't say it was Tina who said that.
Oh,
so
okay.
It could be that it was Alice. Alice went and herded all the passengers up to the front.
Okay.
So it could have been maybe while
that's a good point.
Gregory's getting up and just turning around looking, and she's going, don't look at that guy,
or
something. That's plausible.
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps. Let's see. More question for Ryan. How many documents are left for the FBI to be released?
Yeah, this is a question I'm curious about too. It has to be an inordinate amount, right? I mean, we've scratched the surface here, right? Or are we on the downslope here of releases?
Okay, good question. So according to Mark Zaid, they estimated that there was something like 80,000 documents. We're currently at about 41,000 or 42,000 currently. And they release about 300 to 500 a month. So it's taken them since January of 2017 to release 40,000 documents. So to release another 40,000 documents would be another 7 years. So we're looking at 2030 or something.
So you've discovered that the FBI is releasing these documents sort of systematically, correct? Yeah. It's not just a random release of, hey, let's just grab this file folder and scan it and send it out. So based on their system of sending things out, can you kind of tell us what we should expect in the near future to come out of the vault?
Yeah. So the way that's worked is the first, 38,000 of these documents were in chronological order, mostly, of documents that were basically, they were files that were sent to and from the Seattle office, from other FBI offices, or documents that they sent out. So there's a lot of redundancy. If you take out the redundancies, the redundant documents, it probably goes from 40,000 to even like 30,000.
I would even say fewer, because there's so many redundancies in
there. And so, because basically if they sent something to Portland that they also sent to Vegas and to DC, you get all of those in there. You get all of them in there. So, but basically the first like 40,000 documents that they've released are just incoming and outgoing messages from Seattle to outside agencies, or so like, for example, if Jackson, Mississippi's office has a lead, they sent that lead to Seattle. That document has been released. Okay. So everything that's coming from an outside source to the FBI has been released already. Okay. But right now what they're into are the suspect folders. We got 1,062 of these suspect folders, we call them. So if you were important enough as a suspect or as a it's not really suspect, subject folders. So for example, like the tie is like subject folder 386 or something. It might be McCoy actually, but like, the tie has a dedicated folder. Okay. Right. The Tina Barr is going to have one, things like that. So we're just now getting into that. And those are going to be chronological, right? Because the order of the files are the order of the suspect files are in order too. So, for example, a couple months ago, we finally learned out we learned who suspect number 1 was, right? That was news. Got a guy named Thomas Henry Johnston, really interesting character. I write about him in the book. He was literally suspect number 1. And we know suspect number 1062 is L.D. Cooper. So we know who the first and we know who the last are. And when you know a suspect's number, it's kind of a big deal because that allows me to FOIA for them. So, for example, there is a really good suspect who I'm really interested in named Orville Lyons. I've talked about him before. He's the last person.
Yeah, Bruce pried that information out of you.
He did. I didn't want to get it. But Orville Lyons, though.
I was watching that and I was like, man, Bruce is like a pit bull on someone's leg, man.
You're going to tell us or what? I'm like, fine. Yankee bastard. I'll tell you. But no, so Lyons, in the documents that have been released so far, oftentimes you'll see the suspect number scratched in somewhere, handwritten usually. Like on a document for Langseth, it'll say 327 somewhere. So I know that's his number. Well, some of these redactors for the FBI, whoever these little interns are just little tyrants, and they're terrible. They're tyrants, and they'll erase everything. They'll redact everything. So they'll redact, the suspect number. So I don't know Lyons' suspect number. So I can't say to the FBI, hey, I would like all the files on Orville Lyons, because they'll go, we can neither confirm nor deny that he's in our files. But if you have the number, I can say I would like everything that is in subject. Don't even say their name. Just say I want everything in subject file 1082-164-327. That's Langseth. Okay. So and they're almost like robots. They go, okay, we will accept this information. You have used the correct passcode. Now we'll give it to you. Well, so I can't do that with Lyons, and it makes me really mad because I'd like to know more about this guy and why they eliminated this guy who was a really good suspect. Remember, I've said it before. Lyons is the guy who, when the FBI approached him in a town called Tumsuba, Mississippi, they say, "Hi, we're with the FBI." He goes, "Oh, is this about the hijacking? This is 1984. Like, that's weird." And they thought that was weird. That was their headline in their communication to Seattle, saying, "This guy brought up the hijacking before we did." That's suspicious to them. And it's suspicious to me too, honestly. Just, I don't know what's going on there. And he's an interesting guy. He's a drifter, no family.
What gets me with these guys is that they're really interesting guys, but there doesn't seem to be, for a lot of them, not for all of them, but for a noticeable amount, there doesn't seem to be any resolution. There doesn't seem to be any memo that says he's been eliminated based on this. It's open-ended, like with Dr. Roman, I guess. Well, Dr. Roman's a little different because they eliminated him based on his ex-wife's statement. But, right. But with Wright, with
Lyons, we don't know.
Lyons, we don't have,
because that's in the subject file, though. That's going to be in the file. That's why I want the file, because when we get to the file, you'll see why they eliminated him.
Gotcha.
See, because here's the thing that I'm going to point out, that the reason why these subject files are good is because most of the documents within here are internal files. So it's not files that they're sending out to the other agencies. So it's going to be, a lot of these files are going to be new to us because it's not things they sent out. So let's see, Olivia again.
So hold on one second, Ryan. Let me follow up on that. So near future, I'm assuming through 2024, the end of 2024, we can expect to see nothing but suspect files. Is that accurate?
We're not going to see anything but suspect files for years and years and years and years and years. I mean, like 5 years even, I suspect. It's going to be a lot. Let's see. Olivia again says, what would you say is the biggest misconception people have about this case? Chris?
Well, off the top of my head, I'd probably say that DB Cooper was some kind of lovable rogue, some, scamp, with a smile and a wink, and not a bad guy, and folk hero and an anti-hero, and isn't he cool? When in fact, he was maybe 1 degree below a terrorist, and certainly a thief and an extortionist,
Right.
and he, whether it was real or not, threatened the lives of 36 people.
Right.
So I think, people who have a positive view and who kind of fanboy over DB Cooper are in the wrong. I think that's a big misconception. And then I think another one that's really big that I see a lot in like comments underneath articles about DB Cooper is, oh, well, this case was solved back then. It was so-and-so. The FBI solved this back in such and such, and it was McCoy. This case was solved back in such and such, and it was Robert Rackstraw. This case was solved. The case is not solved. It's a cold case. It's not been closed. So I would say those are the biggest misconceptions that people have, is that Cooper was this suave, cool, debonair, lovable rogue, pulling off this Robin Hood type heist, and that the case is solved, which it is not. What about you?
Well, for me, I guess I like your answer about him being a polite gentleman or something. It's silly. But I like that one. But I guess I would say that the aesthetic of the hijacking is incorrect in people's brains. The image of it is incorrect, being that he jumped over a wilderness, being that he jumped on a freezing rainstorm. I think the mental image of DB Cooper, the aesthetic of the event is incorrect in people's memory or their concept of it, how it looks.
Yeah. And
that's really important because to know that he was just as likely to land on somebody's roof as he was in a tree.
Yeah. Yep. And then I think the configuration of him, I mean, we always see the picture. Cooper's, splayed out to the 4 corners of the compass, and he's got the briefcase, holding onto the briefcase with his right hand, and money is flying out the sides. And, that's just not, that's not how Cooper looked when he jumped out of the airplane.
It's with a bag flying behind him, probably. So no, it's exactly, or again, like you said.
Does little Coop have kung fu grip?
He actually can grab things like his cigarettes and things. So
okay, well there you go.
Actually, he is pliable, but I would say,
matches.
Well, on that, I would say too that again, the image, Martin McNally really has enlightened my views sometimes with the fact that he slid down on his butt and was scared. Well, not scared. Mac wasn't scared of anything, but the fact that he slid down on his butt, being cautious like this.
Well, he was scared of getting his brains blown out by the pilots.
True.
That's why he let go. So
right. But like the image of Cooper going Geronimo out the back is it could be, but maybe not.
Yeah. There's this image that people have of, waving and winking at Tina as she walks away, and and then struts down, real boldly down the steps, and swan dives off the bottom. And I don't think it was like that at all. He was not, as we've said before, he was not Han Solo with a clip-on tie.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
he was a bad guy. He was a villain. He was a heel. He committed a capital offense and threatened the lives of 36 people and extorted $200,000.
As much as McNally is a friend of ours now, a good friend even, he will freely
admit him last night, as a matter of fact.
There you go. Yeah, he will freely admit, I would have killed somebody that day. Absolutely, he almost did. Yeah. He almost killed the big guy who was in the plane. He thought he was going to attack him. So Mac, a couple times actually, almost pulled the trigger on his gun. So I mean, Mac was prepared to kill somebody. And as much as he's a friend of mine now, I would say 38 years basically in solitary is going to make you a little different. He grew up a lot, I suppose. But no. I mean, look, McCoy is, these Vietnam guys had killed people, and so I think that, and again, their brains weren't their brains were screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
They were really scary. I know that McCoy, his note, he told one of the stewardesses, "Hey, it's a long way down without a parachute." He's very threatening. Rob Hetty fired a .357 Magnum, which is a very loud gun.
That could air condition an elephant.
He fired it inside the plane a couple times and just horrified everybody. It freaked out. It's loud, and he was a threatening person, wearing a hood over his head like a old lynch mob guy.
Yeah.
It was scary.
But you don't have to have psychological problems to be a criminal. You just need to be greedy. You just need to be greedy and have no scruples. So he could just have been a piece of crap, and he doesn't have to be dying of a terminal illness. He doesn't have to, he could just be a piece of crap that wants to make a quick buck, and he's got some parachuting experience and big imagination, big balls.
Yeah. Let's see. Where is it? Chrissy says, as a lawyer, would you defend DB Cooper in court? I would defend Lucifer himself if you paid me enough. So yes, I would absolutely defend DB Cooper. I have defended murderers in court. So Cooper was not a murderer, at least. So yes, I absolutely would defend DB Cooper if you pay me enough.
Now, I know this has been asked before, but let's say tomorrow they arrest DB Cooper and he's a 98-year-old man. Do you think that they arraign him, put him on trial?
Herb Walcom.
Yeah. Do you think they do that? Or what do you think the FBI's reaction would be if they identify DB Cooper and he's a 98-year-old guy living in a farmhouse in Iowa?
I think they would, by law, have to do that. They would have to prosecute him. Now, what they would do with that prosecution, they may not indict him. They may not go to that point. They may arrest him and work out a deal or something. I don't know. But I don't think they would spend the resources, doing this against him. I think they would arrest him and maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe they would release the guy, or they would have him do a publicity tour, apology tour, whatever. I don't know, but I don't think they would.
Well, I could even see them doing something like, "Hey, tell us how you did it. Tell us what happened. Tell us the story, and we'll drop the charges."
Something like that. Yeah,
That's what I would do. That's what I would do. Is I would be like, "Listen, tell us the story, give us the deets, and we'll let you walk."
Yeah, and there are people who will say that. There are people who will say, "Well, they prosecute 95-year-old, concentration camp guards."
Yeah,
but that's different.
Very different.
It's very different circumstances. You're atoning for the sins that killed millions of people. That's a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
And again, just look at the fact that the hijackers who were caught were let go, most of them within 10 years. Rob Hetty and LaPointe only served 6 years. If Mac hadn't kept trying to escape, he would have been let go.
Yeah.
Pretty soon after.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a lot of, even back then, they didn't have a lot of bloodlust for these hijackers for whatever reason. It was like a fad, and they understood it to be a fad or something. Let's see. Who has, let's see, there's going to be more questions here. Okay. Where did it go? Does Mac regret what he did? Did he send letters to apologize while in jail to the crew? I don't know if he sent letters to apologize, but he is friendly with his Tina. They are, they text. He was texting. He was sending his Tina text messages during CooperCon, showing her pictures and things. So they've worked it out. So if Mac and Sharon, his Tina, have worked it out, well, then maybe Cooper could have too with Tina. Let's see. If you had to pick one eyewitness whose account is the most credible, no offense, but I don't trust Flo in the moment. It depends on what you're asking for. If you're asking for how he looked, I'm going to go with Flo, because she is the only one who interacted with him both before and after he became a hijacker. So she interacted with him, I believe, I've counted it up, maybe 7 or 8 times, separate times before he became the hijacker. She greeted him as he came on the plane. She took his drink order. She made his drink for him. She brought him change.
More than Tina? Because, Tina sat next to the dude for 5 hours and lit his cigarettes.
Right. But that's not visual though. I would say that because Tina admitted that she didn't want to antagonize him by looking at him. So it depends on best witness for what purpose. I think visually it's going to be Flo, but I think that, personality, it's obviously going to be Tina easily for sure. I would say that. Let's see. Let's see.
I know Pac had a question about the Solarama glasses.
Mm-hmm.
I have them right here.
Yes, let's see them.
I'm going to put them on.
Do it.
And then I'll answer the question. So I was doing some research and ran across these sunglasses, and they are vintage. And I got them off of eBay. They are vintage from that era. And they look remarkably similar to the types of sunglasses that Cooper has on in the sketch. And I bought these on eBay, and Ryan himself bought himself a pair. And I'm fairly certain that they are the glasses that Cooper wore. Not 100%, because I'm not 100% on anything. And I do think that the sketches portray a frame along the bottom.
They do.
Which these do not have.
Right.
That could be just the sketch artist assuming they did, or it could indicate a different brand of sunglasses like Ray-Bans, for example. So I'm going to, just because I found them, I'm just going to say these are the ones.
Sure.
Just, until proven otherwise. But it's possible that they were a different brand. But what's remarkable to me about these is I could wear these outside to the supermarket, or where I live in South Florida, everybody wears sunglasses. And I could wear these outside and nobody would know that these are 50, 60-year-old sunglasses. I mean, these look completely contemporary. And as you can see, kind of a side profile, they're a little bit wraparound. I think they're very, very intriguing. And, like I said, because I found them, I'm going to say they are. But either way, they're cool glasses. I'm going to bring them to CooperCon with me, even though I won't need them in dreary Seattle.
Let's see. Okay. Olivia asks, what presentation are you most looking forward to at CooperCon? I will say Mr. Chris's presentation. But I would, because you are holding out on me about what you've got. So I'm interested to see that.
The only reason I'm not really holding out, the issue is that the information, the evidence that I have is very, very technical and very complicated. And I need to be able to lay it out in a way that is easily understandable. And that's one of the things that Tom Kay is great at, is he's able to take something as complicated as diatoms and titanium antimony and those types of things and make it digestible for the layperson. So I need to take my findings about the radio communications and phone patches and those types of things and make it easily digestible for a layperson. So it's hard for me to kind of explain it in 90 seconds on a podcast. Mm-hmm. So once I have it all together, hopefully it'll bring it up and it'll be worthwhile. But I don't plan on making any major breakthroughs, but hopefully it'll be interesting. People will find it interesting.
What's your answer?
My answer is without a doubt. Well, obviously anything Tom Kay always brings, he always brings the smoke. So he's always, a great piece of information, great presenter. The only thing that Tom does is he makes me incredibly belligerent afterwards, because he just produces more questions than answers with his findings. And he just leaves me walking out of the auditorium with a great deal of angst. But no, I'm joking. I love Tom. So to answer the question, I'm really looking forward to Brian Ingram and seeing Brian speak.
Oh, sure.
I've never met Brian personally. We've communicated a little bit online, but I'm really looking forward to meeting him on person and hearing what he has to say and asking some questions of Brian. I think Brian is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, he is the main event. He's the last speaker on day 3.
Good.
So he is the main event, and hopefully everybody will stick around and listen to him. I'm hoping to get Bill Grinnell there again this year, and I would love to introduce Bill Grinnell to Brian Ingram and get a photograph with those two. because Bill Grinnell was the bank representative who transported the money to the airport and handed it off to the FBI. And of course, Brian was the 8-year-old boy who found it several years later. And having the guy who transported the money from the bank and meeting the guy who found it on the beach 8.5 years later, I think is a very cool vortexy kind of thing. So
there may only be 3 degrees of separation
right
between those 2 guys, which would be Al Lee, Tina.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a cool deal. So I'm hoping to get Bill Grinnell there. So I'm looking forward to Brian Ingram. I think he's I don't think he's spoken there at CooperCon in a couple of years, and by all accounts is a very nice, very friendly guy. So I'm looking forward to him.
Okay. All right. Nikki says, where did it go from Nikki? Nikki says, he says, how can we see his suit if he didn't take his raincoat? If he didn't take off his raincoat? Well, I mean, let's go back to that photograph. I mean, or that image that I've kind of created. I would say it's not buttoned. I mean, people wear raincoats, overcoats like that, top coats, like a businessman. You wear a top coat. You don't button it. So, I mean, Cooper would look like weird, kind of weird walking around that thing buttoned up. So I don't think it was buttoned. I think it was unbuttoned like that. And the people, again, low lighting on an aircraft, you're not, everything looks black if you're just looking at, that brown looks black from a distance. And I think when people say he's wearing black, they're describing his overcoat, because that's the main thing they're going to see is his overcoat.
Right. To play devil's advocate, though, Gregory is the only one that describes it as russet, right? Anything other than
but Tina calls it brown, remember?
She does?
Yeah, okay. Tina says brown with a black stripe. So
yeah.
No. Yeah. That's
and do we have a description of the raincoat? Was it a trench coat, like a duster?
Okay, so so basically, I would say that, okay, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but the 3 different stewardesses call it 3 different things, okay? Tina, I believe, calls it a top coat. Okay, now, again, don't quote me. People, don't come at me. But Tina says it's a top coat. Flo says it's an overcoat. Alice says it is a trench coat. Bill says it was a raincoat. So we have our 4 closest witnesses all use different terminology. Now, the reason why I think it might be a trench coat is because of the specificity of that. So an overcoat can mean lots of different things. Top coat can mean just a generic term. Trench coat is not a generic term. That is an actual term. It's an actual item. So for her it's the only thing. So raincoat, top coat, overcoat, trench coat. That's the only one that's actually specific. And so I think it's probably more likely to be a trench coat.
And it seems like to me, like a raincoat would be sort of a little more casual. A trench coat seems like it would go with the weather and go with his.
It's got more pockets probably too, maybe even.
Go with his business attire sort of.
That too, his setup. You're right. Yeah, maybe more. Chrissy says, have you gone through every single FBI document? Yes, actually.
Yeah, and I'm not proud to say that. That's not bragging. I'm embarrassed to say that, yes, I have put my eyes on every single piece of paper that the FBI has released. That's how much of a loser I am.
We're losers. We are loser bros together, man. It's with a tag team of doom, or the tag team of loneliness and weight gain. I don't know.
Oh man,
something.
Trying to turn that around, buddy.
Yeah, weight loss. Yeah, both of us. I think both of us are losing some weight. Let's see. Was Braden questioned over this? Not that we're aware of. Braden. Larry Carr says he does not. The only time Larry says he does not know the name Braden. He never saw it until the vortex spit it out. So now, granted, Larry's not going to remember every name, but I don't think so.
It's kind of along those same lines. I know it's popped up on various platforms about the Air America and Southern Air Transport, some of the CIA operations that were going on in Southeast Asia, and whether or not any of those guys were interviewed. And I know that there seems to be a statement from one of the smoke jumpers who was involved in Air America, who says that the FBI interviewed him and interviewed just about all the other smoke jumpers and who were working for the CIA at the time. So it would seem that the FBI was certainly aware of Air America and Southern Air Transport and those types of things, and were interviewing those folks. But how deep down the rabbit hole they went with that, or were even allowed to go, is probably unknown. But the FBI certainly knew about the CIA operations in Southeast Asia revolving around the 727, it would appear.
Okay. Majek says, what happened to the senior stewardess, Alice Hancock, after the skyjacking? Did she continue to work as a stewardess? Flo and Tina get more attention.
What do you call her?
Who?
Alice? She's the what? Of the you parallel her with the moon, with the walking on the moon.
Oh, she's the Michael Collins of the stewardesses,
right.
for sure.
Right.
She's the Mike Collins. Yeah, she's the one who didn't get to go walk on the moon. So yeah, she is the third wheel, I guess. But I'm proud of that. Yeah, she's the Michael Collins of the crew. But she did stay as a stewardess for a couple more years, not too long. But Alice was an interesting character. Alice had been skydiving before the hijacking even. She, I believe, got into scuba diving even afterwards. I'm almost positive that she maybe got a pilot's license or something like that. I think so, because her husband was a pilot. So
he was a important pilot.
Yes.
I mean, he was involved, if I'm not mistaken, in the investigation and assisted and answered some questions regarding parachute survivability and those types of things.
Right. Yes. Let's see. Okay. Next question is, Olivia, in your opinion, who was the biggest hero of the hijacking?
You want to go first?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's generic to say Tina, because she possibly could have acted a certain way that pissed him off. I mean, these guys, if his psychology was off a little bit, maybe he wouldn't have liked someone treating him differently. Maybe he would have responded negatively to someone not treating him with respect or whatever. We just don't know. I mean, so I think by default, it's got to be Tina. I don't really know who else.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I think it's Tina. I think the only other close second would have to be the cockpit crew, because if you remember, the cockpit crew had the opportunity to abandon Tina on board and escape themselves.
Yeah.
And they all agreed that that was not the right thing to do, that was not the honorable thing to do, that they were not going to abandon their crewmate, and decided to stay aboard, even at the risk of their own lives. So I think that shows remarkable courage. I have always been, and I've spoken about this to you privately, is I have always been enamored with how the crew, whether it be Tina, the flight attendants, the cockpit crew, ground personnel, NWA flight ops, Seattle flight dispatch, the police officers, the bank personnel, how everybody did everything with utmost professionalism, with utmost bravery.
Yeah.
And they did the best that they could in an extraordinary ordeal. If I was ever going to write a book about Cooper, that would be the angle I would take. Cooper would be a secondary character. I would write about the people who were involved on the ground and in the air, trying to make sure that Flight 305 landed safely, and no souls were lost. So I've always found that the most interesting part of this. So I think Tina for sure is number one. A cockpit crew has to be up there as well.
Sure. All right. Sean L. asked, what are the top 3 Cooper books to get when you're starting to look into the case, assuming Bruce is a given? Well, okay. So you're assuming Bruce is a given of the 3, or we need 3 additional books? I don't know.
Let's say Bruce is a given. Let's give him 3 more.
Okay. We'll go back and forth. Then I'll say, obviously, I think Tusaw's narrative is really good.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that Marty Andrade's book has to be up there as well.
Yeah. I see. I'm looking over at the bookshelf. I think that I think Skyjack serves a purpose. I feel like it's a good cultural. It's almost like Skyjack is as close as you get to a book about the mania of the vortex, really. And I think that's important. The psychology of the vortex as a whole. So I would say Skyjack is, and it's a good read too.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the first books I read on it. I've always said that I think Dr. Robert Edwards' book, D.B. Cooper and Flight 305, is a great book, but it is very technical. It's very detailed. I don't think it's an entry-level book for someone new to the case, but I think it's a terrific book.
Yeah. Olivia again asks, what is one aspect of the case that you wish people understood better or knew more about? Well, I think I would say that what we discussed earlier about that aspect of him being not a good person, maybe. So, handle your suspects accordingly, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's difficult for people. I guess I wish, not that I wish, I don't know how to articulate this properly without coming across as an ass. I would like people to understand the aviation aspect, the radio communications, the radar, the flight configurations, all of that sort of stuff surrounding the flight itself, selfishly because I want to be able to talk to people about it. And I kind of feel like when I talk to people about it, people's eyes glaze over and they start to just their mind wander because they're like, what the hell are you talking about, Cunningham? I don't care. So I kind of wish people, were a little more interested in that aspect of it and kind of the aviation aspect of it. And we are getting some more pilots, which is terrific in the Vortex. And it's been terrific. Like Bernie Harrigan has been just a delight having him. And having somebody to bounce off of. And I've talked to other pilots too, and it's great, having people and you can kind of, and I'm not a pilot. I don't even like to fly.
Yeah.
I'm completely self-taught, but I enjoy talking to people who can kind of speak that same language and speak it on a very expert level. So that's one thing I wish people understood a little bit better, was just the technical details of the flight.
I would say that, and this I guess sounds arrogant too, but if you come into the case, just have deference to other people, or I know that things have come, it's all been done before. Every theory.
Oh yes.
I mean, look, as I point out in the book, we laugh about the crew is in on it. He hit on the plane. These things were literally already discussed days after the hijacking. So November 71 was not even over and they're having to confront crew was in on it, hit on the plane. Mm-hmm. These are not new. Now I did say on Reddit, and the poor guy, I wasn't being a jerk. Some guy on Reddit posted yesterday and I was genuinely giving him a compliment. I said, even after all these years, I'm surprised that somebody can come up with a theory that I've never heard of. And his theory was that maybe there's nothing left of Cooper because when he landed, he broke his leg and couldn't get out and still had his briefcase with him and decided to end it all. So he blew himself up with the dynamite. So he just blew into a million pieces. And that's why nothing's been found. I was like, okay, I've never heard that one. And he says, could the money have blown to Tina Bar from where he blew himself up? So I've never heard that one before. That was completely new to me, that he blew himself up. Why do you think Cooper chose Thanksgiving Eve to carry out his plan?
Well, I think the most commonly held belief in regards to that is that it allowed for a long weekend, right? And he could hijack the plane on Wednesday and have enough time to extricate himself, get home, get settled, hide everything, and then be back to work on Monday. But whether that's the case or not, I don't know. It would seem that trying to get a flight on an airplane Thanksgiving Eve, that's literally the worst time of year to try to get a flight. Now, maybe things were different in 71. This flight did not seem to be at capacity.
A third full.
So, maybe I'm showing my age here by suggesting that, but the best explanation that I can come up with is that he wanted that long weekend. He wanted that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to get to the ground, get to safety, get home, and lay low, and then be back to work on Monday. And nobody was the wiser. And, hey, there's Bill back to work, 9 a.m., and nobody would have any idea that he jumped out of an airplane the previous Wednesday.
I would say, I don't think he had a job. Honestly, I don't, and because of the copycats, I don't know of any of them that had steady employment, like not a one, literally not a single one. So I would say not, but yeah, I mean, there's some theory that maybe he thought that he might get the B team cops because the good cops were off Thanksgiving, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, the day before Thanksgiving, Ralph Himmelsbach was called when he was eating a hamburger at In-N-Out or somewhere,
Yeah. Well, the flip side of that, and talking to Bill Grinnell, is that they were getting ready to hightail it out of there a little early from the bank. It's the day before Thanksgiving. They want to get home. They want to be with their families. So they were getting ready to pack up and leave. And it just happened that call came in just before they were getting ready to head out. So had that call come in 15, 20 minutes later, that bank, I don't know, it would have taken a lot longer for Cooper to get his money because they would have had to call everybody back to the bank or find a different bank. So, that may not have been the best idea for Cooper either in trying to get that money.
Who is Erica? We've not had her answer this question. Do either of you have a favorite suspect who 100% isn't Cooper? Personally, I like Barb as a suspect. It's a cool story. I would go with McCoy, I think. He's not Cooper, but I like his story.
I'd figure you'd say Braden.
Oh, well, yeah. I guess so. But no, I don't know he's not Cooper, though. That's the difference. The question is 100% not Cooper. That's why I wouldn't say Braden. I'm not convinced of that. I mean, in fact, to this day, I would say that if you literally had a gun to my head and I had to name a name or die, I'm going to say Braden just because of the ones out there, he's the most plausible, even though he's got some major issues. He's still plausible. But 100% isn't Cooper. McCoy, just because I like his, having communicated with his kids now, and and again, I just like, I don't know, I kind of feel for the guy. He went through a lot of stuff. He had problems from the war. He was not a bad guy. I mean, everybody, it's interesting to say that when we say that Cooper was a bad guy, but McCoy was damaged mentally. And so Cooper may have been a good guy who was damaged mentally. We don't know, but he didn't act like it. That's the difference. Cooper acts more like the criminals who did this, not the guys who were just jittery from the war, like LaPointe and Hetty or Francis Goodell, he was still active military. He was literally in uniform when he did his copycat hijacking. Okay. So that's that. Let's see. Who was yours?
Oh, I'd probably say Gossett. I think Gossett is such a fun dude. He's got such a fun story, and he's such a wild man with such an interesting background. I mean, that guy lived an interesting life, man. So yeah, I'd have to choose Gossett.
Okay. Let's see. Olivia again says, "Are you guys interested in any other cold cases?" I know you certainly are. I'm not really, but you certainly are.
Yeah. What about you?
Not really. I mean, I like Amelia Earhart enough. I don't know enough about it to even say, like, I like the Nika Maroru theory on her, that she was marooned there.
Me too.
I think there's some evidence there. There's a photograph called the Bevington object. You see there's an actual photograph taken by a passing British ship in like 1938 that clearly shows an artificial object sticking out that looks like the wheel of an Electra. They've done like the State Department, Hillary Clinton, even when she was Secretary of State, commissioned them to look into it. And there is a State Department official government thing saying this looks to us like the wheel of an Electra.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there was something that came out, I think it was late last year, where they some researchers found was it satellite data or aerial photograph of an object that they thought looked like an airplane.
Now that's recent. That's going to be off of like the Philippines or somewhere. I think that's the idea.
2023, right?
Yeah, that's the idea that she turned around and flew back.
Yeah.
which I don't know. But
But
Nikki
I know
Maroro,
that got a lot of headlines.
it did. But the fact that we have this object there that sticks out weirdly, we've got 1930s female cosmetic items found on that beach.
Yeah.
And there were no people there until like the 40s or something. You know, there were
I think they found a
military guys.
They found a skeleton there, and that
and it's been lost during
and
during the bombing in World War II.
They did some type of analysis on it and believed that it was a female of European descent.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot there, and there's just a whole lot there. And then there's the one about I forget what, like there was a ship that washed ashore there. I think there was a big liner a commercial ship crashed there. And I feel like it was called like the New York or something like that. And there's the girl who claims to have written down a bunch of notes that she was getting pinging off the radio. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, some girl wrote in a diary they found where she could hear a woman's voice saying
ham radio. Yeah.
Ham radio saying Mayday, Mayday. And she kept saying New York.
Yeah.
New York. She's saying, hey, this is what we see.
The ham radio thing is interesting, and we're getting off topic here, but the ham radio thing is interesting because those things can ping around the world. And travel unbelievable distances.
Norwich City, that's it. The Norwich City. So,
unbelievable distances. So, and this girl, I think she was a young girl, 13, 14, 15. So she'd have no reason to make it up. And the details align very closely with, you know, you can really make a case. So yeah, very, 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 very cool case. Obviously I'm interested in the Zodiac case. That's pretty well known. I've been looking into that for a long time. But a case that's kind of near and dear to my heart is the murder of Matthew Margulies in Greenwich, Connecticut, 1994. He was a 13-year-old boy. He was fishing along a river in his small town of Pemberwick, which is a suburb of Greenwich, and disappeared and was found about a week later in some woods and was murdered, and just really a bad scene. And I researched that to the point where I believed that I had found the guy who did it, and approached one of the retired detectives on the case. And he confirmed, in fact, that that's who the police believed it was too. But they don't have enough evidence to charge the guy. So that's a case that I've been looking into, but I'm kind of a true crime nerd. I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of different stuff. So
I would say that one thing I admire about you is that you are a true, you know, you're going to be intellectually honest with yourself. And I know that I won't say his name, but, you know, you have an idea of a suspect, perhaps a person of interest. And you have done what the interesting part about that is that this guy went missing, and you have, even though you like this guy as possibly Cooper, you assisted, or you've tried to assist the detective on the case. There is still a detective assigned to it.
Yeah.
With information that would actually disprove the Cooper thing. Like the guy's buried somewhere, like maybe he's buried there. So you're actually actively, as a good scientist, as you should, disprove your own theory.
Oh, and I've said before, like if you're gonna with the DB Cooper case, if you're gonna come up with a suspect, you should not be looking for reasons why he's Cooper. You should be looking for reasons why he's not. And the fewer reasons that you can find why not, then maybe you're on the right track.
Right.
But people always, and any detective, FBI agent, whoever, PI will tell you, we begin by trying to eliminate suspects, not by confirming them.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's what I've tried to do with this guy. And I found exculpatory evidence, and I've passed that on to the detective. I found more evidence on this case than the working detective did. The working detective did not have the guy's social security number. I found it. The detective did not have his military records. I got them and gave them to him.
Right.
So, you know, and that's why I've never gone public with the guy, you know, out of respect for the family, but because I don't know if he's Cooper or not. And I'm not going to go and, you know, put somebody's name out there that I'm not sure is Cooper just because, for what? To say I have a suspect?
Sure. Yeah.
It benefits me not at all, and benefits nobody. So as long as I'm communicating with the detective and passing on information to them, hopefully they'll do their job and try to.
So you got that in the Zodiac, and it was brought to my attention. Somebody told me recently about there's a case, and there's not much information online about it, but there's a case, some of you may know about it. In Brazil, these two guys were found dead of like completely unknown reasons, and they were wearing like radiation masks or something.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
And it's really strange. And they can't find out any reason what killed them both. There's nothing on them at all. And they were wearing like radioactive masks or something. Maybe people know what that was.
Yeah. Another one that's weird too, and I think it's recent, was it 2002, where two guys in Africa stole a 727
still missing
in the airport and disappeared.
It's still gone. There is a 727.
It's still gone. They've never found it, and they've never found them.
I imagine they crashed probably.
Well, yeah, you would assume, but how freaking weird is that? You can just steal a 727 and disappear into the night.
Do you want to tell us? Do you have a favorite Zodiac suspect?
I don't.
Yeah, I figured you don't.
No, I don't. I do like Charles Klingel, who was connected with the 1990s. The letter that came out, it was written in 1990, but it was discovered in 2007, called the Eureka card. And it was a postcard that was written to the San Francisco Chronicle. And the handwriting on the front of the envelope is eerily similar to the Zodiac's. And all it says is, "From your secret pal." And it's a cartoon picture of a snowman. And I think he's talking to a rabbit. And inside was a photocopy of 2 safe deposit box keys. And Tom Voigt, who is a friend and is a member of the Vortex, along with his wonderful wife, Angie. Yep. Tom tracked down that had the serial numbers on the keys and tracked it down to a post office box in Eureka, California. And traced it to a guy named Charles Clark Klingel. And he passed that information on to the law enforcement, as he should. And law enforcement ran his DNA and eliminated him. However, within the last 2 years, it's been determined that the DNA that's been used to eliminate Zodiac suspects is probably contaminated because they took it off the front of the stamp and not the back of the stamp. So, long story short, I like Klingel, but I don't know if he's Zodiac or not. Sure.
Here's a funny,
definitely not Cooper though.
No, sure. Here's a funny one. I like this. I'm a doctor, not a skyjacker, McCoy. That's funny.
God damn it, Jim.
Damn it, Jim. Interesting sidebar. McCoy is an Ole Miss grad, like I am actually. Really? McCoy, in the fictional universe of Star Trek, McCoy is a Mississippian like me and went to the University of Mississippi Medical Center. So there's that. Let's see. Lionheart.
Well, here's another weird thing. What was the name of that? There was that the guy that was in Quantum Leap, Scott Bakula.
Scott Bakula.
And he was in a Star Wars series called Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, sure.
And his backstory is that he grew up in northern New York, which is where I'm from. So I always like to think that he was born and raised in my hometown in northern New York.
May as well be. Yeah, his dad helped invent the warp drive or something like that in the thing. Yeah. Let's see. Lionheart asks, did Cooper work with an accomplice? What did copycats do, lone wolf or with the help of others? Okay, so of our canonical 6 copycats, I'll start out in order. LaPointe did not have an accomplice. McCoy was next. His wife was an accomplice, and his idiot sister-in-law was aware of it, which was a mistake.
Never do business with your in-laws.
No, and she ratted him out quick. Let's see. I want to say Heineman was next. He had no accomplice we're aware of. I don't believe so at all. McNally had an accomplice, Walter Petlakowski, who drove him to St. Louis.
Ended up being his downfall.
He did. Petlakowski, his wife, urged him to confess because they were looking into them. So Rob Hetty had no accomplice, and Melvin Fisher had no accomplice. So mixed bag. As far as Cooper having an accomplice, I don't think so, because it seems like it seems like his planning would have made an accomplice unnecessary. Like he would have had no way to know where he was going to land, really. So, I mean, I suppose he could have said the easiest way to do it, I think, if you had an accomplice, would say, look, drop me off at the airport, go hang out at a hotel or whatever, or somewhere go hang out where I know the number and just sit there. I don't know when I'm going to be jumping out, but I'll call you. I'll get to a phone somehow. I'll let you know where I am. You can come get me. I think that's the only way that Cooper could have had an accomplice, is the accomplice where it's like, hey, just go hang out and I'll call you whenever I'll figure out somewhere. So I don't think an accomplice. I think, and also an accomplice. So only one person can keep a secret, and I think the fact that we don't know who Cooper is indicative.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough. If Cooper was successful, it would be hard enough for him to keep his mouth shut. It would be even harder for his buddy to keep his mouth shut. So I think if he had an accomplice, the accomplice or Cooper would have spilled the beans by now.
If Cooper died in the jump, does this mean he is not much of a legend? Well, I mean, he's still a legend as far as, like Bigfoot or something. He's still a legendary person, even if he died. I would say maybe it even makes him more legendary because he's, never going to be known, really. I think that if he died that night, it's less likely we'll ever know who he was.
It's not the most embarrassing thing that could happen to him. The most embarrassing thing that could happen to Cooper is if he jumped and lost the money in the jump and ended up landing safely in a cow pasture somewhere without the money and not knowing where the money ended up. Because then all you can do at that point is just curse yourself out and tuck your tail between your legs and get home in time for Thanksgiving dinner empty-handed. And then you're probably never going to speak a word of that to anybody because, what a colossal fold, in losing the money. So, auguring into the ground at terminal velocity is not the worst thing that could happen to Cooper, in my opinion.
Says plot twist: the accomplice killed Cooper. Well, honestly, it's not. I mean, there are worse ideas than that. I've not that it actually. I remember I asked Larry Carr that actually recently. I was talking to Larry, and I was like, "Do you know of this happening where accomplices will kill each other?" He goes, "Absolutely. That's not just Goodfellas, or whatever
Tarantino movie stuff."
Yeah, it does happen. Absolutely. There's no honor among thieves, as they say.
Right.
And I point to, so I'll tell everybody a story here. So Thomas Henry Johnston is suspect number one. Talk about him in my book a lot, but I won't give too much away. But Thomas Henry Johnston was a guy who was arrested around 2 p.m. Outside Woodland. 2 p.m. the day of the skyjacking. This guy is arrested for DUI, actually. Outside Woodland. Okay. Now, so he's in jail he's sitting in jail during the hijacking, but he's still there. Now, Cooper walks into the airport, sometime earlier, and maybe this guy was his accomplice because this guy was their suspect number one. In fact, what happened is they got a call. So Arkansas got a call, or someone in Arkansas, the day after the hijacking, somebody in Arkansas calls the FBI and says, "Hey, look, there was a guy who was lurking around here for a while who was this felon, a major felon. He was I think he was a bank robber even." So there was this guy who was taking skydiving lessons down here. He was talking, this is the day after the hijacking. There was a local guy who was a thief who was not from the area, who was living here in West Memphis. He was taking skydiving lessons. He had bought maps of Portland and Seattle recently. Yada, yada, yada. And he was a crook, and he talked about hijackings. You should look into him. So the FBI in Arkansas, they go to West Memphis, Arkansas, and they go to the post office because that's where you get the addresses of people. It's the post office. So they go to the post office and they go, "Hey, will you tell us the address of where this guy, Thomas Johnston, lives?" They go, "Oh, actually a month ago, he started having his mail forwarded to Portland." It's like, "Oh, okay. That's interesting." So this is the guy that they arrest in the DZ the day of the hijacking. Is they arrest a guy who had just moved from Arkansas, of all places, who was taking skydiving lessons and was a bank robber and had bought maps of Portland and Seattle and was a pilot without a license. He had been arrested many times for flying aircraft without licenses. So, and remember, this guy is arrested the day of the hijacking in Woodland. So that's,
so what's the implication there?
Well, he ends up dead in March of 72. He's 48 years old in Portland. No cause is listed of his death. So he just dies mysteriously in Portland in March of 72. So it's, I don't know, I guess the implication would be that maybe he was the accomplice and was arrested. And so maybe Cooper's going ring, 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 ring. Oh my God, he lost his nerve and got drunk. He was scared or something and went and get, like, it reminds me, for example, I think about in the Lincoln assassination conspiracy, right? A lot of folks don't realize that the Abraham Lincoln assassination was a conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they tried to behead the entire government, essentially. They were going to kill the vice president also. They were going to kill Grant because Grant was supposed to be there that night with Lincoln. And they were going to kill the Secretary of State. Of course, Booth assassinates Lincoln. A young man, a 20-year-old named Lewis Powell, a Confederate secret agent, charges into the Secretary of State's house and tries to kill him with a knife. And the Secretary of State, 2 days before, had been in a carriage, the equivalent of a car accident. He was in a carriage accident, had a giant neck brace on his neck, laying there in bed. So with a giant Bowie knife, this 20-year-old stud is like stabbing this guy, slices half his face off. All pictures of William Seward. After, this is the guy who bought Alaska, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They called it Seward's folly, buying Alaska for $3 million. Not a folly at all. But in hindsight. But so all the
real
pictures,
estate's always a good investment.
Yes, absolutely. Especially that giant loved one. But all the photographs of William Seward after this incident are from the side. He did not show his face because he had his face sliced off by this guy. But the guy who was supposed to kill Johnson, the vice president, sat there, and Johnston was living in a hotel. There was no Blair house for the vice president to live in. They just lived wherever. And Johnson was living in a hotel, and the assassin started to try to calm his nerves and started drinking and got too drunk and went and knocked on the door. His plan was literally just knock on the door of the vice president and shoot him in the face. But knocked on the door and got scared and drunkenly wandered off. Lost his nerve at the right moment, and that saved Johnson's life. So it's possible that if Cooper had an accomplice,
Sic semper tyrannis.
There you go. Yes. If Cooper had an accomplice, it could have, maybe he went and got drunk and lost his nerve and was supposed to go wait in the DZ and was waiting drunk in the DZ and got arrested. And
so when did the FBI get on Johnston?
The day after the hijacking.
So
literally.
So did they make any connection to anybody, or where did the investigation go?
Well, for one thing, he was in jail at the time of the hijacking, so that eliminated him immediately. But what's interesting is they did not know he was in jail until days later. So they had eliminated him the day of the hijacking because he was among the very first photos shown to the stewardesses. We know that his photo was shown to the stewardesses, and they said no. He may have actually been the first set of photos because he was suspect number one. But then they're like, oh, by the way, he was actually in jail at the time. And they go, oh, well, that's even more evidence it wasn't him, right? But that sent a chill through my bones when I saw that.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm surprised that the FBI, in hindsight, didn't think, okay, well, we know he was in jail, but boy, that is a all-star lineup of coincidences. Perhaps there's another connection here, and they looked into his, his
associates. Yeah,
his associates. Exactly right. His criminal associates. I'm surprised that they did not do that.
I mean, we have a lot of coincidences in this case, a lot. But the fact that a skydiving bank robber is arrested in the DZ the day while Cooper's in the air and then the guy dies in March of 72 for reasons. Yeah. That's odd. That might be the top coincidence, I think.
Yeah.
That I've ever found.
Very vortexy.
Very vortexy. Let's see. Okay. Somebody says, what is your string of suspects? Who did you start with and who are you on? Well, I mean, I don't know.
I've never had a string of suspects. I've never been really a suspect guy. I looked at the suspects. None of them have really been compelling to me. It always seems like they all have a fatal flaw or two or three. So I've never really been a guy who's been like, oh, it's this guy, and then gotten off of him, and oh, it's this guy, and then gotten off of him. I just haven't approached the case that way.
I like suspects. I mean, I've promoted lots of suspects. A lot of them. I mean, it's not, I obviously am attached to a degree to Braden and Verdal. I've been, I suppose, most active on those two. But that's not saying that I think they are Cooper. It's saying that I think they're interesting and worthy of more inspection. That's all.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with
it's like a guy like Skip Hall
or Catalano or
Skip Hall. Skip Hall has recently come on and he's an intriguing suspect and requires more vetting and more analysis and research and all of those type of things. So yeah, I mean, I people are interesting to me, but I'm not a guy where it's like, oh, it's definitely this guy and I'm going to promote him and advocate for him. And this is why he's the guy. Like I said, I've always approached the case where let me find out reasons why he's not Cooper. Let me find out reasons to eliminate him. And that sounds counterintuitive, but that's how every professional detective, law enforcement investigator is going to approach cases like this.
Okay. Here's one. Besides Vincent and Verdal, has anyone else been potentially connected to the tie elements?
I don't believe so.
No. Interestingly, Jason Langseth was a industrial chemicals salesman at the time, which is notable. I mean, that could be a very, that could be an explanation for the tie. I think Skip Hall, there's been some discussion that maybe he was around, aerospace manufacturing, which he was. He did work at a plant, so maybe, but not directly from the tie particles. I mean, we've had a lot of people who were metallurgists and things that I found, but not anybody named. Really.
Yeah, I probably sit in the audience when it comes to the tie particles because I don't know exactly what they mean really. And what I mean by that is, does it mean he was in aerospace? Do they indicate that he was in R&D? Do they indicate that he was a metallurgist? What does it mean? You know what I mean? What do the tie particles mean? It's hard for me to really understand. I really need somebody to be like, this is what they mean. This is what they indicate. They indicate that he was in R&D. Or it indicates that he worked on, front alignments for Buicks, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So, it would be nice for somebody, and hopefully this new research into the stubs will yield some more definitive evidence. And we can really say, yeah, industrial chemicals is not going to contribute to this. We can eliminate that as a source, or, the TISB is not TISB, it's TICA. And Verdal and Peterson go poof as suspects. I don't care, whatever the case may be. I just want to kind of know more about it and see where the tie particles lead, because it seems like it's a little bit like reading tea leaves. Everybody kind of sees what they want to see.
It's a Rorschach test. It's like the sketches.
Exactly. So, it seems, in talking with people with expertise on this, that it seems to point in the direction of R&D, research and development with special metals. That's what it seems to be pointing to.
Sure.
But I'd like something a little more definitive. That way we can say, can't be this, can't be that, has to be this, and have a little more certainty.
This is a good one. This is actually a really good question. I'm glad that you asked this, Erica. Would Cooper have known the FBI had the serial numbers after the hijacking, as in, was it public knowledge?
Well, they released them to the public.
They did eventually. I feel like, God, I wish I had my book in front of me. I feel like, I think the first acknowledgement that the serial numbers were recorded was a week or two. It wasn't immediately. It was a week or two when it was in the papers, I guess. They made the booklet still within November. So the booklet that went to the banks maybe has a date of like November 29th on it, something like that. But actually like in the papers where Cooper would have read about it. But honestly, though, he should have assumed they were going to do that. I mean, I know he asked for dirty bills, but I don't know. I mean, you kind of assume that they're going to give you marked numbers, Wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, and how is he going to know? I mean, I don't think there's a way to really look. I mean, he gave a very cursory look at the money. So
Yeah, I don't think he cared.
He didn't really care. He figured, okay, feels real to me. One just wanted to get the hell off the plane.
Do you think any of the people who confessed to the hijacking actually committed it? No, not at all. No, not even close. I mean, really, the confessors that I know of, I mean, it's not as many as you think, honestly. I know there's a guy named Arthur Denham.
Boy, I've heard a number as high as 900.
No, not even remotely. No, no. In fact, the only ones I can think of, Dwayne allegedly said that. I don't know. I tend to believe Joe. I don't think she would waste her life on a fantasy. Maybe. I mean, maybe she was.
You don't?
Well, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you're right. But Gossett apparently was a confessor. Weber, Recca, of course, was a confessor.
But there were a lot. Not LD. There were a lot of lesser known people who confessed, deathbed confessions and things like that.
No, I mean, really not a lot in the files. I mean, people may have confessed like at a bar or something, right? It's different than, to me, that's different than like what Gossett did or what Recca did. That's a lot of effort. It's one thing to like bloviate at a bar, and you see that a lot in the files, but you don't see what we're talking about here with many people, surprisingly. Let's see. Okay. Do either of you think Cooper flew that route before? Normally a criminal scouts his target for weeks before. The missed note from Cooper suggests he might have flown that route before. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but do I think Cooper flew do you think Cooper took a test flight?
I think Cooper, yes, I do. And I think with any heist, it is common for those perpetrating the heist to case their suspect, to case the place that they are going to rob from, right?
McCoy did, by the way. McCoy did test flight.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna rob a bank, you're going to case the bank. You're going to go in there a few times, check out with the security, what they're armed with.
Mac scouted the airport.
Mac did, right. He did research. You're going to research what you're going to do. I mean, I know it's a fictional movie, but, look at the Ocean's 11 movies. I mean, the impeccable research. They knew the ins and outs. If you're going to do, I think the Gardner heist was impeccably, researched. They knew the ins and outs, the entries and exits and all of those things. So, yeah, I think in preparation for this, Cooper researched the 727. He flew on the 727. I think he was on the plane before, and I think that he was probably inspired and was sitting on a flight and looked back and saw that thing. And I said, I wonder if that can open up in the air. Boy, if that can open up the air, somebody could jump out the back of that. I mean, all it takes is a little bit of kind of outside the box, thinking.
And again, if he's a Cini copycat, it doesn't even require his own thought.
Yeah. So yes, I think it is common for people who are trying to perpetrate a heist to case the area that they are trying to rob from, to find out as much information about it as they can. And I don't think Cooper was any different in that regard.
Yes. Packer has a question. It says, what are your thoughts on Mark Meltzer stating that if Cooper didn't know the air stairs could be deployed, he'd be flying in a jail, and if he'd be flying in an aluminum jail cell? How did Cooper know this? Good question. I mean, how did he know for 100% positive that those stairs would come down in flight? Because it's true. If he did not know that, he was screwed.
But do we know that he knew 100%?
Well, good question. I don't know. I think so. I mean,
why would you not? I mean, in other words, what would prevent the stairs from not being opened? Assuming that the plane is depressurized. We know we can't open doors in the middle of flight because the plane is pressurized. But an unpressurized plane, what would prevent the door from being open?
That's true. And also, too, I mean, it's not just 727s. There's the Caribous. There's the C-130s that do this. Mm-hmm. So any Yeah, you're right. I don't think it requires some genius, but seems like I do think there is something there. I mean, the fact that Air America was kicking crap out at 15-degree flaps and with gear down, that seems
But
something
correct
there.
me if I'm wrong, but Air America had the stairs removed when they were doing that.
They did. There were no stairs. Yeah, they had a ramp. All they would do is they would close the bulkhead door.
Right. So that's a little different scenario than knowing that the stairs could be lowered. It's one thing to know you can go out the back. It's another to know that you can open the stairs mid-flight and jump out.
Right. And a lot of the hijackers were surprised at how the stairs didn't come down as very far.
Mm-hmm.
I know Mac squeezed through at 3 feet clearance.
Yeah.
McCoy wasn't completely open either, I believe.
I think Boeing said that at that speed, at the speed that 305 was going to open about 20 degrees. Mm. If memory serves.
Oh, just by gravity, not
just by gravity.
Walking down,
yeah. Open about 20 degrees. And then obviously, I think Soderlund tells them as his weight moves down the stairs, it would open more. But just floating or flying behind the airplane in the airstream, it would open about 20 degrees.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I still think I don't know. It's a good question whether he just thought of it himself. Maybe he saw Cini and said, well, I do understand physics and airplanes pressurization and things. I mean, yeah, you're right. Let's see.
What I do find curious though, along those same lines, is that he kept Tina on board the aircraft, presumably to lower the air stairs for him. But then when push came to shove and she became terrified that she was going to get sucked out, he basically said, you know what, never mind, go to the cockpit, I'll do it. So why would he need Tina if he already knew what he was doing? That's always kind of been a little perplexing to me.
That is. It could have just been he wanted to keep her there for his own, just to make sure he had a hostage back there. But again, why would he would just say, stay with me. He didn't have to say, I need this girl to lower the stairs. He would just tell them, hey, she stays, this one stays.
Right. And
they would have listened to him. Yeah. For sure.
And I mean, we've talked about it before. Operating the air stairs is not complicated. It is a lever and a button. I mean, it's
basic.
Yeah. I mean, it's like lowering the deck on a riding lawnmower. It's not.
Here's one that I don't guess, as much as you and I have talked about this, I don't know your thoughts on this. What did Cooper do with the parachute when he landed? Is it buried somewhere, or did he carry it out of the DZ?
I guess that depends on what you believe the outcome of Cooper was. If I guess if you believe that he landed safely and alive, I mean, that's a great question. And I don't really know. I guess we'd have to kind of look at the copycats and see if we can get it. I would assume that he would stash it quickly and hide it in an empty log or in some brush, or, I don't think he'd take the time to bury it. But I can see him wadding up the canopy and maybe stuffing it back in the bag as best he could and finding a quick hiding place for it.
He definitely stashed it somewhere.
Yeah. But, if you believe what I believe, that his landing was much closer to the Columbia, then it's possible that the river explains everything. And then that
threw it in there
and it went in the water, and it's now either buried under, tons of silt at the bottom of the Columbia or washed out to the Pacific. But, that's a great question. If he landed in brush prairie safely, then presumably by this point in time, after 50 plus years, somebody would have found a canopy stashed under a rock or under a log, or, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So the copycats, so McCoy stashed his temporarily with the money in a culvert under a road. He came back to get it later on that night.
Right.
Okay? And they found it in his house. Heinemann, they eventually did find his parachute at some point, months later. Okay. Hetty stashed his parachute and eventually told the FBI where it was and where the money was. So his parachute was with his money, stashed them together. And he said, hey, it's in some bushes over there. Mac, after he defiled his parachute, they found it somewhere. They did find Mac's parachute. And LaPointe, of course, was caught in the act. So
I think that's probably the most logical scenario, is that he stashed it and then came back for it and extricated himself a second time from the area. I can't think of any other reason why it has not been found. The only reason, if he landed in the Orchards, Vancouver area, why has that parachute not been found after 53 years? You know that it would be. I mean, that's not remote wilderness. So it would be found somewhere by now. And the fact that it has not, the only explanation I can think of is, he stashed it, and then a day or so later came back and got it.
That's a good question. From Olivia again. Persons of interest so far have been mostly individuals who remained in the U.S. Do you think it's likely that Cooper moved abroad immediately after the hijacking and never returned? Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that would make sense. Honestly, I mean, the money, aside from the money being found that was on Tina Bar, I mean, let's just say he took the money to Vietnam or somewhere. I mean, that would certainly make it less likely that it would show up in circulation. I know that Arthur Friedberg said it would show up in circulation. It would absolutely have showed up. But, if you're in a foreign country, maybe it would be a less probability that it would show back up.
Yeah.
So and he may not have even been, honestly, I really think that there is a lot of Canadians will say, look, we have, especially when people who live near the border, saying American currency, having to say those words is something that they do. Mm-hmm. And so Cooper, whatever it was, did absolutely either say American currency or U.S. currency. Mm-hmm. And that is not something that's a weird clue, because I just cannot imagine an American saying, I want U.S. dollars.
What's odd to me is he asked for American currency, but wanted to be flown to Mexico City. So presumably, let's just assume that he wanted to go to Mexico City. I think both of us would agree that that was a ruse, and mm-hmm. Mexico City was not his final destination. But it seems odd to me, if you're going to Mexico City, why wouldn't you ask for pesos that you could spend? But perhaps trying to find pesos in Seattle on a deadline is a little more difficult.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So let's see. We're going to start wrapping it up here shortly, but let's see some more questions.
I've seen a few questions about the Tina Bar money, and somebody asked a couple times about whether it was found unprotected or inside of a bag or a case or a box, and it was found unprotected. It was 3 packets of money. They were found with rubber bands that deteriorated almost immediately upon touch. They were found sort of stacked kind of disjointedly upon one another. And they were under maybe 3-4 inches of sand.
Yeah, very
enough for an 8-year-old to brush it off with his arm, brush the sand away with his arm. But it was found completely unprotected and very, very deteriorated, and essentially wet lumps of
I found
deteriorated cash.
So I found a good comp recently. They found money that had been sitting out for like 30 years recently. Somebody did. There it is. So I found that photograph, and you can see the rubber bands are still there, interestingly. Mm-hmm. So I don't know the exact circumstances, but they found this money. It was like they found like $100,000 under a house. Some construction workers did. It was just sitting there. So, who's to say? It's the Tina Bar is the biggest. And for those wondering, yes, I did write a Tina Bar chapter, and thank you, Chris. And I'm proud of it, actually.
Yeah, I've read it. It's great.
You read it? Yeah, I'm thinking it did a good job. Honestly, it's not a topic I like, but
no, it's great. It's great.
Yeah,
and along Tina Bar too, or talking about the rubber bands. People say, oh, there's no way the rubber bands could survive 8 years, et cetera, et cetera. I was talking to Bill Grinnell, who worked for banks for 40 years, in various capacities in security for banks. And he's collected bank rubber bands for 40 years. He says he's got a drawer full of old rubber bands, some as old as 40 years old, and they are still in the condition that he got them from.
So I spoke to, oh, bless him. Oh, he's one of our, I feel so terrible. one of our Star Note guys. I'm blanking on his name. Who's our Star Note guy?
Nikki, come on. What's our Star Note guy?
Oh my God, I am so embarrassed because he's a nice guy, and I talked to him the other day. Crap, Nikki, our Star Note guy. Who is it? Oh my God, I'm so sorry, fella. I'm so sorry, but he is a metal detector enthusiast. Does things, goes into old houses and investigates things and just does kind of old rummaging things. And he came across somebody's basement at some point. He went into a basement that literally had like paper, like calendars and things from like the 30s that hadn't been touched in like 80 years, 90 years now. And he found like documents that were rubber banded from like the 1930s, and those rubber bands were still on there.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
he's like, it depends on the environment.
In the past, the two enemies of rubber bands are ultraviolet light and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you can protect rubber bands from ultraviolet light and try to make it as oxygen-free environment as possible, those rubber bands can last much longer than they are given credit for.
Yeah.
And I would think that buried under piles of sand is a low oxygen, low UV light environment, and those rubber bands could last.
Yeah. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't have lasted. But we know they weren't. Well, and by the way, I remembered his name, of course, Derek John. I'm sorry, yeah. Derek.
I kept thinking Damon, but then I was confusing Derek and John together. Yeah, no,
Derek is actually making a documentary, or attempting to, about the actual vortex, about the people in the vortex. So I did an interview with him.
Good luck, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez.
He was already at CooperCon last time, doing some stuff. So let's see. I think, can we have, Alan says, can we have at least one more aerial store party? I think we can rent out the whole town. Well, Ariel's, I think that shop is basically condemned. I think
it's dilapidated.
Yeah, the floor is falling through.
Yeah,
I don't think that it. Yeah, if it hadn't been for the staircase pressure bump giving away his jump spot, do you think the case would be pretty much hopeless? I would say it makes no difference. It may as well be. We may as well not know where he jumped. It has made no difference.
Yeah, the case remains unsolved.
Yeah,
it's if it's anything, it helped maybe bring about the end of some copycat hijackings or solve them to a degree. But yeah, I mean, it's been 53 years in November, 54 years.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we're still no closer. So yeah, I mean, it's reduced the search area from maybe 2,000 miles to 20, but those 20 miles might as well be 2,000.
Yeah.
So, it's, I agree. I don't think the case is still hopeless.
A couple more. Let's see. If Cooper threw the bomb out of the plane before jumping, was the bomb ever looked for due to this being a possibility for DNA? Sure. I mean, not for DNA, but they looked for it. In fact, they got the SR-71 Blackbird to look for it.
Yeah.
So,
and the joke is they asked the FBI the FBI asked the U.S. Air Force, can you use infrared to locate the bomb? And the U.S. Air Force says you need a heat source, and a briefcase sitting in the woods is not going to provide a heat source.
And this 302 is, you can almost hear this FBI going, oh, yeah. Okay. But yeah, they're like, oh, what about this? But no, they used the Blackbird because I think correctly figured that Cooper chunked the briefcase and the dummy chute out the back at some point between Tacoma and the Lewis River, somewhere in it. And so,
and frankly, I'm unsurprised that's not been found.
No, in fact,
I mean I mean, we've talked about it. McNally stuff has not been found.
Yeah.
I've talked about the Bear Brook case in New Hampshire, where there was a 50-gallon drum that had human remains found in it in 1980. And they did a massive search of that area and had people walking all over, FBI, law enforcement searching that area. Didn't find anything more. 25 years passes. The cold case detective walks out there. Within 30 minutes, he finds a second 50-gallon drum 300 feet from the original. So, I mean, if you can miss a 50-gallon drum sitting in the woods 300 feet from the original one that you're exhausting every effort to locate, you can certainly miss a attache case or a dummy parachute. It doesn't surprise me at all.
They did not find, when the Army found the body of Barbara Ann Derry, the girl, the hitchhiker, I guess, who was killed by the serial killer named, I think his name was Warren Forrest.
Yeah.
When they found her body, the Army did during the Cooper search, they had already been through there before. That was like the third day of going over the same ground. One of the journalists who was there on the scene said, "Hey, we found K rations and things that had been there from days before."
Yeah,
they walked right over her body several times.
There's a 302, I think it's from 73 maybe, where they said like ground searches are pointless because that area is so grown up that we could literally walk over DB Cooper's body and not find it.
Yeah, they said give up, so it's pointless. But yeah, Barbara Ann Derry's body was found after they'd already been walking through there. So yeah, things are gonna go missing. And again, where he would have thrown the briefcase out is still like timberland. It's not.
Yeah.
And again, and you know what? I mean, if you ever watch David Letterman throwing things off, I mean, because I'm showing my age here, but if you ever watch David Letterman throwing things off of buildings, a briefcase is not going to just land on the ground and be, at terminal velocity. If it didn't hit a tree on the way down and slow itself down, it's going to explode when it hits the ground.
And if some timber guy doing a lumber job runs across a smashed up briefcase, is he immediately going to say, "Oh my God, that's Cooper's briefcase"?
Especially if it's in 1989 or something. I mean,
it's a piece of junk in the woods, just like dozens and dozens and dozens of other pieces of junk in the woods.
Yeah, and I just so that's the way it is. Let's see. I will do one more question here. Let's see.
Because Packer's giving us crap about the length of this.
Hey, well, you can go to bed, old man. Let's see. Somebody said, okay, man.
I think 3 hours is longer than Aaron Rodgers' career as a New York Jet.
That's funny. Okay. Where'd it go? Somebody said, okay, here's the last one. Could the pressure bump have been from anything else, cargo falling out, etc.? No. They replicated it precisely. It reacted the same way. A 200-pound weight going off the stairs was the same thing they felt in the cockpit when Cooper jumped. And we have all of the copycats causing the exact same feeling.
I know I was speaking with someone the other day and they said, well, could it be the bulkhead door opening? And no, the bulkhead door was open.
It was already open, yeah.
It was already open. So, it is one of the few virtual certainties in this case that Cooper jumping from the aft stairs caused the pressure bump.
Yes, that flight path is a certainty. That's a certainty.
Virtual certainty. Yeah.
The sled test proved that the pressure bump, Cooper did jump. Nothing else could have done that. And also another thing too, there's no way that Cooper would have known he needed to replicate that.
Yeah.
To deke them or something, right? So
right.
And he just wouldn't have thought of that, because and again, because nobody had ever done that before.
Yeah.
The Air Force guys, remember, the jumpers who went out for 727s, there were no stairs on those. So he would not have known that.
There's two things. Number one, we should do an episode. We did one about myths and misconceptions. We should do one about certainties and facts, truths. So anyways, keep that in mind. The second thing is Tim Wallace mentioned that it has been revealed that Cooper's overhead light in his seat was on.
Yeah.
I have not heard that. I don't know where that comes from.
From someone leaking something I found.
Can you enlighten us on that, or is that a big fat secret? Because you didn't tell me that, and you tell me everything.
No, you've seen it too. You just didn't pick up on it. But yeah, okay. We do know. I guess I'll say it. Thanks, Bruce Jr. over here exposing everything. I'll end with that. Because I'll share. I'm not like
anybody who's hung in this long with us deserves a little tidbit.
Yeah, I'm not a hoarder of information here. So basically, I know now from doing something that when they went to the back of the plane, when they landed in Reno, Remember, Cooper said, turn all the lights out. When that's the last thing he said to Tina, said, turn the lights out. We do know that that Cooper himself had turned 2 lights on. He had turned on the reading light over his seat, or it may have been over 18, D, we don't know, but it was one of the reading lights was on. And there was a light switch above where the bulkhead door was, where the girls would sit. He had turned that on too. So there were 2 lights on, the reading light and the bulkhead door light that he had turned on. Tina said that she didn't, those weren't on, when she went back there. So yeah. So, Cooper left Cooper. That's kind of cool information.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm surprised that they didn't produce a fingerprint, but.
Well, again, as I've said, Cooper almost certainly either wiped his prints down or his fingerprints were already obfuscated, because it's the only partial prints. It's not a coincidence, maybe, that the only partial prints they find are the ones that are around Cooper's seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually asked John Detler that, who was one of the first case agents. I said, hey, back then, before DNA, fingerprints were the big thing, right? I said, did bad guys actually do that? Did they put glue on their fingers? He goes, absolutely they did.
In fact, the Zodiac claims that he did that. He says he put what he described as airplane glue on his fingertips. And what that's mean is the model airplane glue. And he would put that, he claimed that he put that on his fingertips and to obscure his fingerprints. So yeah, that's a thing.
Interesting. All right, folks. Well, that is it. So our next one will be maybe a month from now. We'll do a truths and facts episode.
Truth and certainties.
Truth and certainties. That's a good. I like that, Chris. So tune in next week for the Hardy Boys. I guess we'll. Yeah. Or Ace and Gary, if you like Saturday Night Live back in the 90s.
Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, that's right. It's not the ambiguously gay duo. I don't think so. Like from Saturday Night Live. But anyway, all right, folks. Well, cheers. Good night. Auf Wiedersehen. Y'all be good. I'll talk to y'all next time.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.